if the council could come to the dais, and if we could get settled down here in the chamber. Thank you.
We'll talk some more about when to leave tomorrow.
Yeah.
Joel? Oh, waiting. David? Guess we're just waiting on David. Joel, are you going to join us up here? Great. And Mike, you can certainly move closer so that you're not too.
Okay. Sure.
Eve has it. I just got my phone.
Okay. City Manager David Everett is just going to be making his way back to join us. Otherwise, we have been meeting since 5 o'clock. It is 7:03. Summer, are we safe to proceed? Okay. So we are now at 2, call for order and Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3, approval of minutes, 3-1, April 9, 2019, regular City Council meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes with the edits that Ronnie and I sent to Eve.
I had edits also. I don't know if you caught them, Eve.
Oh, I can second.
Thank you, Carrie. Karen, thank you, Ronnie. Was there further discussion? Further edits?
I move to amend the minutes with, at the end, the language, Councilmember Jones moved to approve the bills in the amount of $703,915.36. Councilmember Knutson Boyd seconded the motion. The motion passed 4-0 aye with Council members Duncan, DeRossery, Knutson Boyd, and Jones voting aye. Bill Payne, wait.
And that was the amendment.
That's the addition.
Thank you. Yeah, Mike, go ahead and read your,
Make the motion?
your corrections,
Oh,
please.
my corrections. Oh, the corrections were, Eve, to, I left the meeting after the discussion about a property rezone request over on Cane Creek Boulevard and requested that from the mayor and was granted that for reasons of illness. Okay, that's it.
And I think your motion just ends with edits.
Yes.
So, okay, any further edits? Okay, call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Mayor and council reports. I wanted to let you all know that I did meet with Corey, who is on our agenda for Planning Commission. I found him to be a strong candidate that'll provide balance on the Planning Commission. So I did want to let you all know that I did have a meeting with him and a scoping meeting to make sure that it would be the good fit for us as well as for him. I also met with Kate Cannon here at City Hall. My takeaway from my meeting with her was that with respect to moving forward with, or them stepping back regarding the reservation system, she wanted to be clear that with the reservation system, it was the intention that CUAs, companies with commercial use authority, like permitted companies, and shuttles would be allowed to proceed into the park without reservation. So the permit would be in lieu of a reservation, and that she would accommodate shuttles. So I wanted to report that, to all of you, as I know we're continuing to have conversations with others about the reservation system. And I do also plan to host a focus group with her and some others from the community, to include the transit group, the Chamber of Commerce, and others that shared concerns that were pretty vocal during the reservation system, so that she can collect more data and kind of have some more feedback opportunity as she's revisiting. What else? I did draft a white paper for the Governor's Rural Partnership Board, which I serve, that I'll distribute to all of you, although I find it to be a working document at this point, that summarizes the concerns that we have with our growth from the Mighty Five, and our earnest desire to receive more resources from the state, which seems to get gobbled up pretty quickly by the Wasatch Front. So kind of speaking for rural and for us and our region as a member of that board. I attended a webinar on a funding opportunity for low to no emission buses and charging infrastructure. So I've got some information that I'm willing to share. Rosemary also attended the webinar. There seems to be resources out there for buses, for infrastructure, for buses, for charging. So I know that we're involved in different groups that are putting together plans, and I just want to encourage us to share those plans so that we can bring resources together. What else? I met with the Governor's Office of Energy Development members, Alaire Emery and Bergen Eskilden Dilson. She's the Energy Systems Manager, and he's the Rural Development Specialist. She was actually in attendance when I spoke at the symposium a few weeks ago, and set up the meeting to let me know, so that I can let all of us know, that office is definitely interested in working with us to alleviate some of those unintended consequences of tourism. There's study money available, and there's infrastructure money available. So the sooner we get organized with our asks, we can start. That's another office within the state of Utah that's reaching out their hand to help support, just as Vicki Varela with the Office of Tourism has done, and she'll be here May 20th to 22nd, I believe, doing meetings with her team, as well as the Office of Tourism with Tom Adams. What else? This week is KZMU Radiothon, and Molly did do a piece on the planned affordable development where she interviewed a lot of stakeholders, so I do encourage us all to listen to it. You all sounded really good. That is on kzmu.org, news/public affairs, and it's called Housing and Moab City. And then one more thing. This is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and I have, oh gosh, where did they go? Maybe I'll just pull up my laptop. Some statistics that were shared with me from, thank you, Seacaven, for the statistics that I wanted to share. I just wanted to read what was sent to me, if that's okay. Sexual violence in Utah is a serious public health problem affecting thousands of residents each year. Studies in Utah suggest that 1 in 6 women and 1 in 32 men experience rape or attempted rape during their lifetime, and nearly 1 in 3 women will experience some form of sexual violence during their lives. The costs resulting from this violence in 2011 totaled nearly $5 billion, almost $1,700 per Utah resident. The Utah state government spent more than $92 million on people known to have perpetrated sexual violence. Only $569,000 was spent on efforts to prevent sexual violence. Rape is the only violent crime in Utah that is higher than the national average. In a state where other violent crimes such as homicide, robbery, or aggravated assault is historically 2 to 3 times lower than the national average, this is of concern. I asked her to send me grim statistics to put a fine point on the issue of sexual assault, and that this is a month celebrating awareness for it. I don't know if celebrate's the right word. Recognizing, in recognition of that. And that's all from me. Ronnie?
I just have 2 brief things. I wanted to thank Tawny for mentioning the April 13th museum event to us last time. I went, and it was exciting. There's really good turnout. I made it to the evening portion where Larry Sespooch was talking about the Ute culture, but also telling the creation story. Was, if anyone else didn't make it and has the opportunity to see him at any point, just fabulous. And it was nice to see so many people of different ages from the community there. We did have our quarterly UMTRA steering committee meeting today. And just a few little things that might be of interest. We did discuss, because of some of the long-term vision ideas for the UMTRA site and the possibility of passenger rail, having a contact of Joette Langanese come down and talk to us from Union Pacific, Nathan Anderson in the future. So for those of you who are involved in transportation, just give me a heads up and I'll make sure you're on Joette's list, because we wanted to invite other people who are working on that in the community. And we did have a short presentation just on the part related to the UMTRA site, but from Tony Mancuso from Department of Natural Resources, yes. Forest, I always get this backwards. Fire, forest, and state lands. Fire, forest, fire, and state lands. Well, they'll correct me. I can never get that right. Anyway, on the Colorado River Comprehensive Management Plan, which is still in the draft stage, but we were talking a little bit about as it relates to mostly water quality with the UMTRA site. But in case folks have been wondering when the draft will be out for the second public comment period on that, it looks like it'll be around the 3rd week in May. And the other thing that might interest you guys is they're looking out at the UMTRA site. They've been following some of the discussions about night sky ordinance. So they're reading up on that and figuring out how they might contribute to protecting our dark skies. That was it.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Yeah, it was fairly quiet for me, in part because I got bronchitis, thank you, my wife. And also some water meetings, GWSSA water meetings were canceled and so forth. There's some interesting things going on with San Juan County's one and only well out there, which is apparently feeding off leakage from Kens Lake. And so that's interesting. What would happen then if we kept Kens Lake from leaking, which is an expensive proposition to do it permanently anyway. But that's about all I got to report today.
Thanks, Mike. Ronnie?
Ronnie, I'm glad you went to the museum because I was busy being Typhoid Mary that weekend.
That was thanks to Mike, I think I heard.
No,
Thanks his wife, you thank him.
I got
Gave me a cookie yesterday, I think I'm
got
okay.
lectured on getting a flu vaccine because I would have probably been hospitalized if I had not. I know how the flu killed people. It was awful. But I did attend the Romanian trade delegation. Somewhere in there I felt well enough, or maybe I was drugged enough, I don't know. But I am not quite sure how that all got organized, but it was probably one of the most interesting things I have done as a city council member. I believe there were 27 members of the delegation from Romania. And if you think city council meetings, 27. If you think city council meetings are hard to keep up with, try keeping up with 27 people with Romanian accents. You had to listen. And David, I wish you'd put this in the budget. We were all invited to Romania next year. So make sure that gets in there, okay? We were invited, very, very charming people, very friendly, and it's good to know that our problems are international. They share exactly some of the same concerns that we do. And I got a free bottle of wine from Romania. Because there was a winemaker there. And did you taste yours, Chief? I haven't tasted mine yet. But, and in all seriousness, the governor is planning a trade mission to Romania last year. So I've got some other information I would like to share with you, Emily, and with the rest of the council. But it might be worth some of our time to lobby the governor to send a couple or a few of us on that particular mission. That was it.
Can you visit Transylvania?
Transylvania is one of the states in Romania.
Thank you, Tani.
And we all say Dracula wrong. It's Dracula.
So I attended an airport board meeting, and parking at the airport has been quite successful for the first month, with $1,800 in parking fee revenue, which is great. Judd Hill, the airport director, had a discussion with SkyWest about the expansion of services. And for SkyWest to entertain opening up more flight destinations, they need to increase their load factors. During the season, we're at 80 to 90% load factor capacity, but during the off-season, we're only at 25%. So SkyWest has proposed a flight schedule that would increase service to 3 flights a day, 8 months out of the year, and down to 1 during the winter. And it's, of course, with anything, it's meeting some opposition with local airport users, afraid that they would not be able to make their connections to the East Coast or the West Coast. So nothing is set in stone, but it was a way for Judd to open up discussion of trying to get service to other cities. A side note for anyone who owns a toilet, if it's leaking, continually circulating, get it fixed. A water leak from a toilet in a hangar at the airport drained the water tank up there that is used for all airport facilities, and it drained approximately 6,000 gallons of water. So fortunately, they were able to get water up there at a last minute. And the hard stands are completed and open. The tie-down area for large jets has increased by 35%, which is an incredible amount of space for bigger airplanes to come in. I also attended the Grand County Council meeting last week, as I was informed hours before the meeting that there's a resolution being presented from the Transit Committee, in which I am an attending member, regarding trying to get approval from the county to look at having UDOT do a study for a shuttle system for the Moab area and for Arches National Park. I gave you guys a brief rundown through an email, but because of that, the county council wanted to have a larger discussion with the city, the county, and Arches National Park and UDOT together. So there's going to be a meeting on May 7th. So everyone is invited.
Can I ask, is that considered to be like a joint meeting though, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we will have Summer notice it as such?
I think Ruth contacted the.
She did. I
She
just
did?
need to know if we're going to have a quorum so we can make sure we notice it as a meeting. So at this point, I will just make that assumption if you're all okay with that.
And I guess copy her agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Karen. Oh, was there other stuff in
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
I attended a Solid Waste Special Service District Number 1 meeting, and we had a number of presentations at the beginning, including discussion with a resiliency hub representative about collaborating with them on some of their work on promoting better management of our community's solid waste stream. So, and that will take the form of some financial help and for events and participation in one of their community gatherings this spring. And it seems that at the county level, discussions about community cleanup are gathering steam, which they do every few years. But as reported by Councilmember McGann, there's less vocal attachment to people's stored items.
Treasures.
Treasures, exactly. Thank you. So they may be moving forward with that in some form and possibly seeking collaboration with the city that might have a financial component. And we're moving forward with getting a new baler to replace our decrepit ancient one at the recycling center so we can better process commodities, especially the cardboard that tends to assume a mountainous form in midsummer.
Where do old balers go?
Oh, well, this baler is probably scrap metal. It is that old.
It gets recycled?
It's bales. Eat their own.
They eat their own.
And that's all I have.
Thank you, Kaylin. David, we are now in section 5, administrative reports. David?
Yes, thank you. A few things. One, it was requested that I begin to compile a formal transition plan for the handover to Joel here in the next few months. So that's, I've drafted one and started it really and sent you all a link to have you tell me what else you think should be in there. If there are things, I'm looking forward to that. I spent some time meeting with different people in Salt Lake City when I was up there last week. One was I met with Landmark and we and Zachariah, and we conferenced Joel in really to mind meld a little bit ahead of today and the future meetings coming up. So that was a good, productive meeting. I met with the GSBS folks who are our other on-call consultants for planning services. And they were the group that thus far is doing, we're doing a couple things, but one item that had been kind of backburnered was the Powerhouse Lane sort of small area planning process. But they're going to re-engage on that with Nora in particular now that she's on board and really make sure they're coordinating closely with Betsy Byrne in that process that's happening.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so that was the sort of thrust of my wanting to meet with them was to make sure that was happening. Obviously, having Nora start this week is a big deal, and I've been working with her and other staff to ensure that she is onboarding well. It's certainly drinking from the fire hose, at least initially. So there's a lot to talk about. While I was in Salt Lake, I also met with Jeff Gittens, who is our water attorney, as it were, who's on call for us, and Chris conferenced in for that one, and we had a productive meeting to just really orient him and get his feedback on things we need to be doing. And he will most likely join us for the May meeting, at which tentatively we are scheduled to also have Dr. Ken Combe brief you all on his reporting, his work thus far. So figured it made a lot of sense for Jeff to join us for that meeting and hear what everybody else is hearing. So I believe that is all I had. Let me just check my list, but yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, David. And no reports from other
Correct.
admitters. Okay, we are now in section 6, public hearing. 6.1, public hearing for the ADA accessibility improvements to downtown recreation facilities project. This is our second hearing, and as these things go, I have a document that I must read every word, so please bear with me. I, Emily Niehaus, Mayor, open the public hearing for the CDBG program. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow all citizens to provide input concerning the project that was awarded under the 2019 Community Development Block Grant Program. The city has amended its capital investment plan and decided to apply for funds on behalf of the ADA accessibility improvements to downtown recreation facilities project. The application was successful in the regional rating and ranking process of the ADA accessibility improvements to downtown recreation facilities project is programmed to receive a $74,000 grant from CDBG. Assistant City Engineer Mark Jolosant will be project manager. The project primarily involves construction of an enclosed vertical wheelchair lift for the purpose of providing ADA-compliant access to facilities at the Center Street Gym. These facilities include the courts on the upper floor, as well as the 2 downstairs restrooms, 2 locker rooms, and offices. Construction of the lift will require removing existing concrete and excavating a pit for lift access to the lower floor and providing the necessary concrete walls and slab in the new pit. Additional work could include touching up paint where it has been damaged due to the proposed work, modifying existing handrails to close or open pedestrian access routes as needed, and installing trim or other aesthetic treatments to further integrate the new lift into the existing structure. Additionally, project will provide the Center Street Gym and the Moab Arts and Recreation Center with ADA-compliant tactile signage with Braille. These signs would be used for wayfinding and to label restrooms and other permanently designated rooms. Anyone with questions, comments, or suggestions during the hearing, please identify yourself by name before you speak. The clerk will include your names in the minutes, and we would like to specifically respond to your questions and suggestions during the hearing. I will now would I open the public meeting? Do I need a motion to open the public hearing? Do I need a motion? Would you? No? Then let's open the public hearing. Who would like to speak? If you would, please come up to the desk. Seeing no one come up to the desk, I will read the following. Copies of the capital investment plan are available if anyone would like a copy. If no further comments, then this public hearing will be closed by a motion from this council.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Karen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0, and the public hearing is now closed. Thank you all for that patience. We are now in section 7, presentations. Chief Winder and Assistant Chief Edge, please join me up here. Do we know if the microphone is active?
I have you.
Batteries?
She has it.
And we did batteries in it?
I have batteries. I am prepared.
Right here is good. So there are times in your life and in your job where you get to say, this was a really good day. And for me, this is one of them, because I am so proud for the city of Moab to announce that we have decided to move forward with hiring Brett Edge as our new police chief. Now, to say a few words, because we know he's going to.
It all started in a small log cabin. Mayor, I've been told to keep it brief as usual, but on this particular occasion, I just want to say that, just a moment of digression, I just want to thank, first of all, you, Mayor, and members of the council, David, and everybody else in the city for the wonderful opportunity that I have had as chief here in this amazing community. And I do apologize to some extent for my need to depart. With that said, as you know, shortly after arriving here in Moab, you were all so gracious to allow the department to move forward with the selection of an assistant chief. That selection process was comprehensive, and it was, in my opinion, very fortuitous. Almost from the beginning of my association with Brett Edge, it has become very evident that he really is an obvious leader, that he is a gentleman, along with his wonderful family, that is committed to this community and has been so for many years. He possesses skills in administrative and in operational leadership that really are second to none, regardless of the size of the community that one serves. He has been instrumental with me in all of the initiatives that we have moved forward. And perhaps, I think most importantly, is a recognition on the part of this community that the Moab City Police Department has gone through, I think, what we would all recognize were difficult times. Those times are over. This department is one of the best in the state. And that is a function not only of Brett, but of all of the men and women of this incredible department. And I know that this community now supports them wholly. And Brett is the right man to lead your wonderful police department into its next phase. And I'm thrilled that he is the chief of police in Moab City. Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you very much. Your support there are no words to express how important that is to me. 13 years ago, I sat in this room interviewing for the position of Police Officer 1 with Moab City Police Department. Frankly, I didn't think I would get it. Small town, I assumed it would be the chief's buddy's child or something who would get the position. But I got it. And never in a million years would I have imagined that 13 years later, I'd be standing here accepting the position of Chief of Police. This is a massive opportunity, and I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to serve all of you, all of our esteemed members of the council and city management. And this is, I'm stepping into some very large shoes that it's going to be difficult to fill, but I can't thank Chief Winder enough for the mentorship that he's offered. When I learned that he was going to be the next chief and that I may have the opportunity to mentor under him, I can't tell you how ecstatic I was. Nothing could have prepared me more for this role than that mentorship. So I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Chief Winder. So thank you very much, everyone.
One more thing. So while we are making this official announcement tonight, we do plan to have a ceremony where we are going to spend a little more time and have a little more food and be able to say a little more about how thrilled and excited we are for you to take the leadership as Chief of Police in our community. So there is a ceremony forthcoming where we can all participate in a larger room. But for now, we're just so excited to announce this incredible news. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Chief. Thank Oh, drop the mic. Because,
We out.
yeah, Brett. Mic drop. And thank you all for coming out to support him. And there's more.
They don't like us anymore.
Hate that. While they're all moving out, I will read out our Arbor Day proclamation. It's a lot of reading tonight. Sorry. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products, and whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Emily S. Niehaus, Mayor of the City of Moab, Utah, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 26, 2019, as Arbor Day. So we will be having a celebration at Swanee Park, is that correct? Planting a tree?
Hold the mark.
The mark, okay, to plant a tree, and happy Arbor Day to all of us.
Go trees.
Go trees. Okay, finally, we are at the Students of the Month. Chloe and Natalie, will you join me up front, please? So this is an awesome day. So we get to celebrate a new chief, but we also get to celebrate something really unique here. Sisters winning the Student of the Month for middle school for 7th and 8th grade. How cool is that? So, which one's Chloe and which one's Natalie for everybody? Chloe and Natalie. Okay, let me get it. Oh, hold on just one sec. Whereas the staff and faculty of Grand County Middle School on a monthly basis select a Student of the Month based on the student's citizenship and their involvement with their school, and whereas it is the desire of the City of Moab to foster and recognize the contributions of the young people of this community in regards to good citizenship, now therefore the City of Moab joins with the Grand County Middle School in recognizing these girls as outstanding students, positive role models, and shining examples for our community. Now, therefore, I, Emily S. Niehaus, Mayor of the City of Moab, do hereby proclaim Natalie and Chloe as the 7th and 8th grade Students of the Month for April 2019. Congratulations. Here's your pin. And is there a middle school teacher? Oh, come on up, please. I get to embarrass you guys a little bit.
Okay, Chloe has been doing a great job all year. She exhibits excellent character and is always extremely polite to all of her peers and the teachers. Chloe is easy to get along with. She is soft-spoken, friendly, and comes to school with a smile on her face. She is a model student who works to achieve her goals. She demonstrates willingness to go above and beyond what is expected of her. She is kind to other students, respectful to staff, and very organized. She enjoys being busy and involved in many aspects of school. She loves gymnastics, dancing, cheer, and playing her violin. She is a well-rounded person and is a person we like and need at Grand County Middle School. Congratulations, Chloe. And also not only her sister, but I think they're pretty good friends too. Natalie is hardworking no matter what the task presented to her. She excels at academics and has excelled at many other activities throughout the year. She has been involved in Student Council, Honor Society, and the Beacon programs. She plays the violin and is now taken on learning the trumpet. She models a positive attitude and excellent effort in all her activities. She brightens the day with a friendly smile and treats others with kindness and respect. Natalie goes above and beyond, using her time well and providing an excellent example to all at Grand County Middle School. Congratulations, Natalie.
Would you guys like to take a picture before we here? There we go. Okay. Take it easy. Congratulations. You're making an announcement. Gosh, we have a lot to celebrate. Okay, we are now at Citizens to be Heard. I do not have any forms in front of me.
They are out on the table.
They are out on the table. If we do have somebody interested in being a citizen to be heard, you're also welcome to just approach the table if you'd like. Now is your time. And we do allow citizens to be heard on items that are on the agenda, if that's your intention, if you are intending to speak about something that we're going to be discussing later this evening. Otherwise, seeing nobody come up to speak, we will move right along to 9, old business. 9.1, discussion regarding the draft request for proposals for architectural and engineering services for the Walnut Lane Trailer Park redevelopment. Tracy, thank you.
Thank you, council. I would really like to thank you for being old business, but I'm hoping to get this beyond us soon. So this is to discuss the proposed RFP for Walnut Lane redevelopment, and I appreciate all of the comments that you've made. Those are always well taken and good points. So just to clarify, so this RFP is for architects to propose their approach to the redevelopment. No fee will be discussed at this point in the RFP process. Once an architect is selected, a fee will then be negotiated. My second point is that there were council members who were very interested in including larger, well, 3-bedroom units for larger families. So I thought that was a great suggestion. I think, you know, based on parking requirements, of course, the number and buildable units are going to vary. So just something to keep in mind. And we're at the very beginning of this phase. So, you know, the city will be very involved in all the design aspects as we go through this process. So it's kind of a draft, if you will.
So Tracy, on the, if I may.
Let him finish. I'm sorry. I think
Okay.
he just has a summary.
I only have a few points, Mike. So those proposed kind of unit sizes that we're looking at now: studio 275 square feet, 1 bedroom 375 square feet, 2 bedrooms 640 square feet, and roughly kind of based on the math of those, the differences between those other units, the 3-bedroom would be about 900 square feet. And like I said, I have no issues with the comments that, you know, have been made to the RFP document by City Council, and I will incorporate the comments as needed in the RFP and share again once those have been made.
Yeah. So Tracy, excuse me, Tracy, so you mentioned earlier that the units are small in part to make them affordable. They have rather nice, what I want to call them, utilities, appliances and so forth in there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
they're very nice, but in order to keep them affordable, that's one of the reasons you kind of focused on smaller units. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. So we're shooting for, you know, as nice a units with amenities. I mean, there'll be full, you know, appliance packages in all of the units, obviously, even down to the, you know, the studio units will still have, it'll be, you know, a smaller kitchen, but it'll still have a kitchen and bathroom and living space.
Okay.
Because we want these to be livable and, you know, affordable at the same time. So yeah, that's the goal, is to, you know, kind of compress the size. And I've heard, you know, kind of just in general that, you know, there's a lot of these units that, like, because people in Moab who might occupy a 300 or 275 square foot studio likely spends most of the day outside, you know. So it's going to be livable, but it's also, you know, probably not their primary place. They come home to sleep, basically, and they recreate outside. So, and again, the unit amenities, we're not talking about that here, but as we go through this, that's going to be important as well, is, you know, providing outside space on site for residents to, you know, garden or just enjoy the outside. So that's the goal.
So currently in R4, which is half of this parcel, the minimum square footage for a unit is 500. There continues to be discussion. We're going to have discussion about the pad. I know there was discussion about size of unit with respect to the R2, but something to consider when we're talking in a few minutes about unit size is that we do have in this RFP, and we do have as part of this scope, smaller than 500 square foot units. So the smallest one in this RFP is how big?
So 275, so below that minimum would be the 275 square foot studio and the 375 square foot one bedroom.
Okay, so that's good to know.
Yeah.
And then also, in terms of parking in this RFP, it's listed at what? Or did we not specify?
We don't specify in this.
RFP, okay, so we're good, okay. There were a lot of comments, so your intention is to absorb those comments into a final draft?
Yes.
And then do you plan to circulate those comments to us?
It depends on what, David, what do you think the best approach would be?
Circulate the final draft, or?
Right, I would say that, and if the council's desires to have further discussion in the council meeting, we can do that, or we can, if everybody just says that looks great, we can move on.
And could we just make sure that we keep live the document that we commented in, so that we can make sure the comments were addressed in the final?
Sure.
Okay.
Perfect.
So I guess my question to this council is, aside from the comments that we made that will work their way in, or if there's a fuzzy area, you'll call the member that made the comment, what other things do we have that's like still open-ended for questions or comments?
I don't have anything open.
I just wanted to make sure that there's a pet provision in there, that people don't have to get rid of their pets, or that there's a space for their, for them to take their pets outside.
Oh, yes, yeah, definitely.
So Tracy, I might ask, who do you expect to bid on this kind of thing? What kind of businesses?
So the way we have, because the city has obviously a procurement process, which I'm still learning, but so basically at this point, there's a list of state-approved vendors, and most of them are based around Salt Lake City. And of those, I've looked at 5 potentials, and of those, 4 of the 5 are actually currently doing they call them micro units, like these.
Okay.
And they're very well received. So, yeah, so I think the majority of folks who will propose on this, and I've been contacted, just loosely by a few firms, and they're pretty excited to be a part of.
So you're expecting multiple bids then?
Oh, yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
And then also, there is a net to cast. So there was a competition called the Ivory Prize that happened this past year, where the Ivory family put out like a big cash reward for a dynamic design, similar to what you're talking about. And so the like top 5 finishers could also be, I don't know if they're Utah-based,
Right.
but to kind of drop them a line saying that this is a thing too, would be something to look at.
Ivory Homes, who do
Yes.
track homes?
Yeah.
They
So
did
it's
something besides track homes?
it wouldn't be Ivory Homes. It was just the candidates that they pulled with this prize. I got to meet a few of them up in Salt Lake, and their designs were really fantastic, comfortable and efficient and clean lines and. Okay, well, is there any further deliberation that we'd like to have or discussion with Tracy? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And there's no action on that item. So now we are at 9:2. However, in light of the fact that we received this attachment late and some discussion that has happened before this meeting, I propose that we postpone this agenda item. There's no need to vote to table it, but we just will not entertain it, and we will just put it on our next council meeting's agenda, unless anybody would like to still discuss.
No, I just want to check if we have a little bit of time between now and the next meeting. David, I got the latest version you sent to open, so I can go ahead and read that one, right?
That's the one, yeah.
Okay, great.
I struggled opening it. Is it small enough that it can be emailed, or?
The one, I emailed one out
You emailed one, okay.
today.
It was the final one, the third one I was able to.
And it was openable? Okay.
I saw one letter here, David, where one link worked and the other one didn't.
Yes, yeah, and it's a mystery. It worked for me, so I don't know, I don't know. But regardless, I emailed you the version that was the link for that's the April 12th version, the one that went to Planning Commission, and that's the one that you got an email now, and that's the one to review and look at. And it's
Okay.
not too different from the November one, other than it sounds like the recommendations section was fleshed out a little bit more in the April version.
So we're going to postpone that, and we're going to move on tonight to 9.3, ordinance sorry, should have drank a little coffee. Ordinance 2019-02, amending the City of Moab Municipal Code by adding a new chapter 17.68, Planned Affordable Development PAD, briefing and possible action. Chris.
So, Mayor, after your last workshop in which council discussed PAD informally, I was tasked with trying to pull together the council thoughts, the consensus that emerged from that process, to the extent there was one. I realized there were some differences. And so the draft that I brought before you, I think does those things. I have continued to receive additional comments from council members, which I'm trying to incorporate into the draft as we proceed. And I'll summarize where we're at. I've circulated a memo to you that outlines the changes. The big change to emerge from the workshop was that I think the council made a decision, or at least was there was a majority in support of the idea that for the PAD development, that the zoning districts where it would apply would include the R3, the R4, the C1, C2, C4, C5, and the MH1 districts. The big omission there was taking it out of the R2 district. And so this draft omits the R2 district as an area where a PAD development would be allowed. There was also changes to address the ratio of different affordability stages for any development, the relative amounts of market rate units and the other units that would be affordable to the various income tiers. And I've received some additional comments on that. I mean, the draft that's before you tonight contemplates that in a PAD development, you would have a maximum of 30% of the units that would be market rate units. And if you'll recall, having a certain number of market rate units was deemed to be a necessary component to make these developments financially feasible for developers given their land costs. The comment that seemed to emerge from the workshop was about 30% was deemed to be realistic. I've since also gotten some other comments from others that said, well, the ratios of other income tiers for developments maybe shouldn't be set in stone. And one of the things I wanted to get some input from you all on is whether or not you see a need for fixed criteria, or do you want to have some flexibility as you review these types of developments? One of the takeaways that I got was that 30% for market rate units, it seems to be a pretty well-established number. But the question is, do you want to have differing ratios for, say, a very low income or one of the other income tiers? A lot of that depends on the economics of each particular project. One of the things I've thought about is that you may want to consider just leaving that 30% figure, saying that there will be no more than 30% of the units in any PAD development that would be market rate, and then make determinations on a case-by-case basis for whether or not you have a mixture of very low or moderate income housing units in any particular development. So that's one issue for you. The other thing that emerged from the workshop, and I may in part be at fault here since I wasn't at the workshop and I'm kind of reconstructing from the audio tape, was that there was a lot of discussion about a minimum unit size. And what seemed to result was a minimum unit size of 475 square feet for like a studio unit, for example, was one of the figures that was discussed. That, I think, was discussed in the context of concessions, density concessions that might be appropriate in the R2 zone. And so I guess one of the draft that's before you does have a minimum unit size of 475 square feet, but as you've heard from Tracy regarding our Walnut Lane RFP, micro units of smaller sizes may be appropriate. So you may want to consider whether that 475 square feet is indeed too restrictive. It's there in this draft that's before you, but you may want to, previous drafts, we did not make those kinds of minimum unit size determinations. We tied that to the building code and said to developers, each unit has to have a certain number of rooms, certain types of rooms, but you make the design work. So that's another consideration there. The other thing that emerged from the workshop was, I guess there was a lot of talk about parking, mandated parking. This draft contemplates that you're going to have as many parking spaces as you have bedrooms per unit. I think, again, that was discussed in the context of what do we need to do for that added density in the R2 zone. The question, again, is do you want to stick with that, or do you want to do something less? Earlier drafts have contemplated one parking space for single bedroom units and then additional spaces for additional bedrooms, but it might not be one per bedroom. It could be two. That might truly be all that's really needed. Again, so those are some things that
Tracy, did you want to make a comment? It looked like you were.
Oh, I was just commenting that it was previously it was anything above one bedroom is 1.5.
1.5.
Yeah, per.
So in removing the R2, I think the idea is one space per unit. Is that correct? Instead of one per bedroom or 1.5 per bedroom?
Well, the question is, what does the council want? And I guess, I may have, since I wasn't a participant in that, I may have drawn some erroneous conclusions. And I guess one of the things I would ask for is if you have some direction you want to give me on that. I think if you are going to omit the R2 zone, you might want to be, you may not want to be as restrictive about parking in terms of the mandatory number of units. So that was, again, one of the changes that I looked at. And the other thing that I did was there were some questions about eligibility for pad housing units. The general rule is you got to be employed in Grand County or retired or disabled, one household member, at least one household member in a household to be eligible. The council wanted some changes to make sure that it was clear that if you are retired, it's not that you came here from somewhere else, but that you retired from a Grand County employer. I think that was a really good change. That was something that we've implemented. The provisions require that affordable housing units, that they be your sole place of residence. Actually, all pad units be your sole place of residence. And the question is, there were some questions about leasing and subleasing. We've tried to address those concerns as well. But we've made clear that there's a prohibition on overnight lodging in any pad units. The whole impetus for this ordinance is to provide housing for people who live here and work here, and that type of use is completely inconsistent with the overall goal of providing that kind of housing.
Chris, can I ask one question?
Yes.
You were talking about the requirements that one person has to be employed, disabled, or retired. The way I read that particular paragraph, that doesn't take into consideration a parent who's caring for a child and they're not employed, unless the child is disabled, but.
Right.
Or,
That's a really.
an adult child caring for a parent.
Right. That is a really, I mean, yeah, you could have a parent who's retired or disabled, and that would be one person in that household who would qualify, and then the caregiver might also qualify. But I think that it might be worthwhile to consider that, Tawny, to have some provision that says that a family member caring for another.
I mean, it concerns me because I think there are some, I know that people could cheat, or they'd try to cheat. I know that that happens, but there are some real bona fide reasons that a person would need to live in a pad unit.
Right.
That they're not employed or
Right.
disabled.
Right. And I think that's a fair concern. And I can address
Okay.
that if there's a will to do that.
I mean, isn't it the point to get somebody who is a local resident, though? I mean,
Right.
period.
Yeah, so, and I'll go back to the definite, or we talk about eligible persons, and the persons to be eligible for pad housing would be, they have to have a combined household income, which is 100% or less of the area median income. That's the main thing that I meant to, that qualifies. At least one person in the household must be either employed full-time in Grand County, disabled, or a retired person who was full-time employed by an entity in Grand County. In other words, so that you're not a transplant from somewhere else. And there, as I mentioned, the requirements that persons occupying pad affordable housing units must utilize the housing as their sole residence, and so forth. Some kind of an adjustment to deal with a person who's a resident, who, though not employed, may care for another who's disabled or something like that.
No, I think Tawny was talking, forgive me if I'm wrong, Tawny, but you were speaking of someone who's retired from anywhere.
No, I'm not, Mike. Not,
It has to be,
not in
it has to be
this-
something, because they have to be
in this
retired.
case. No, I don't have anything, there's no problem with, if you're retired, you have to have retired from Grand County. But there are bona fide reasons that a person could need to live in one of these units. And they're not retired, and they're not disabled, and they
And they're
can't
not
work.
employed.
But
Right.
they're
a resident.
unemployed, but they receive unemployment, so they would qualify as low income.
Okay.
So I think they're.
Well, no, if you're a single parent and you haven't worked for
Yeah,
years, you're
or
not gonna
if you
get
have a child that's
unemployment.
under
Or if
5.
you're getting child support for that child and that's your sole source of support.
You'd probably be low income. with
Well,
the
you would
child
be
support.
low income, but that's not what this is saying.
So, Tawny, I think that's a good point, and I'd be happy to, if there's, I'd be happy to make that change and circulate that for consideration. Let's see, other changes. There were some questions about sales units and the appreciation factor that would exist. The existing ordinance ties the appreciation to a maximum percentage per year, which is tied to 3%. And there were some questions about, well, maybe it should be tied to inflation. After giving it some consideration, I think that if someone were to invest in a pad sales unit, let's say they bought a condominium or a home that was developed, they would want to benefit from some appreciation, but the point is that we cap that appreciation to keep those housing units affordable over time. So an appreciation cap is really important, but we might be too restrictive. We may want to consider that it be tied to inflation plus a specified factor. In other words, let's say inflation is 2%. You may want to have that inflation or that appreciation cap be at a total of 5%, for example. So that's again another consideration that you may want to consider. And that was one of the points that was raised in the council comments was, are we being too are we not being rational? And I guess, you know, the point of it is you want people, if they invest in a home, to have some pride of ownership and see some benefit from it if they ever ultimately decide to sell, knowing that it's not going to appreciate at the same rate as a market rate home.
Can I ask a process question?
Sure.
So it seems like what Chris is going through is kind of a punch list of things for us to work out. And there's a number of them, and maybe we're all on board, but I have a number of questions about the current draft, and I appreciate the work that's been done, but it seems like maybe there's still more deliberation to be done, and I'm just wondering if it can be, it seems like maybe if we had a list of these items rather than just a draft, and we were picking them out, maybe that would help us organize our discussion. I'm not sure.
And I apologize, this was my attempt to try to organize the discussion, but
Yeah.
maybe what I ought to try to do, I mean, you've got the draft, you've seen what's in there already. The question is, what changes, if any, do you want? And I'm sure there will be some, to move this across the goal line. The big change, obviously, was the deletion of the R2. The other issues like parking, unit size, and some of these other qualifying and technical changes are pretty important. So maybe you guys can tell me what you'd like to change. I want to try to be as productive with our use of time as possible. And we can go section by section if there are specific comments. I don't know.
What would this council like to do?
The only one that's kind of a no-brainer to me is the minimum size. If it's to fit Tracy's plans, we'd have to shrink it at least 275 square feet, would we not?
Yeah. I mean, if you go back to the Nexus study that we did, basically what the conclusion of that was that given land costs, you have to have higher densities, and they have to be pretty high. And so it means you have to have smaller units for these types of developments to cost out.
But I mean, if we were to pass a pad that will enable us to build Walnut Lane the way Tracy is envisioning it, to pass pad the way it stands right now at 475 square feet won't do us any good at all.
And I guess one of my questions, just to lead that discussion, is there a consensus around that? Should I delete the 475 square foot provision, assuming what's in, what we have in this draft now?
We could alternatively, yes, my short answer, my opinion on it is yes, or alternatively specify another number, i.e. 275 square feet, whatever you guys want to do.
How about a straw poll? Who would like to remove it? Who would like to make it 275? Who would like to keep it at 475?
No, I think we should, if we're gonna make Walnut Lane work, we've got to change that in the pad. That's, like Mike says, that's a no-brainer.
So do you want to change it to 275?
What if we
You guys
don't,
have to make a decision.
what if we don't
'cause we gotta-
specify a size?
That's what I said. That was the first thing I said. Who would like
So
to?
just not have a minimum size.
That's entirely within your right here. And previous drafts have said that. Have said basically there's no minimum unit size. We're going to let the building code decide that. The rooms have to be habitable, and you have to have certain number and types of rooms to make a habitable dwelling.
Can you guys remind me, when you met on March 6th, did it start at 250, was it 256 at that time? I'm trying to remember.
I think I threw out 256 because it's what times what?
Is that 16 squared?
Your number. You did a 16 by 16, and then you tried to calculate for wall size. I mean, then we're going back to, it can potentially be 140 square feet.
That's
And I'm
what
not
I was-
okay, and I'm not okay with that.
I'm not okay with 140 square feet either.
So I would
Because that
feel-
seems like a closet.
16 times 16 is 256. So I think that's where I kind of threw
But
it
then
out.
you said you have to calculate for walls, which is gonna make it more than that.
So 275
So
is.
275, I
Was
would.
the finished room is 16 by 16?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not okay with 140 square feet. I think
I mean, I feel better with 275, if that's what.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like the Walnut Lane project to go ahead and move forward. And to make a comment on your, regardless if it's R2 or R4, or, I mean, I think we were trying to come to a size, not just because it was R2, so.
Okay. So the question is, is there more majority of you that have kind of coalesced around a number less than 475, and I hear 275 being
275.
thrown out. I mean, is
I
there
move we accept 275 square feet.
Well, hold on, you don't need a motion for that.
no. I'm just trying to move it on. I'm just trying to take a
Does
straw.
anyone have
give me
heartburn
some
about
direction.
275?
No.
Okay, then I think we can.
Okay, so I'm gonna make that change, and I will circulate. Now, the question, one of the other questions, well, I'm hijacking things again. Where would you guys like to go from there?
Well, clearly a bunch of us have questions, and thanks, Chris, for replying to some of mine. I think there were still some outstanding. So, I mean, I feel like at some point, some of the questions that I have are for the group. So my question is, do people want to spend time tonight on those questions, or is this a separate workshop? I just kind of need to
This is a
know.
deliberation time, so I say definitely ask your questions to the council.
Okay, I just need clarification because it's been inconsistent. Is the MHRV1 part of the pad? Because it's in some parts of it and not others.
It is, and your comment, it is in there. It's been in there from, I think, the get-go. One of the questions you raised was, well, we don't have a height limitation, and should we have a height limitation? But yes, that land use type could conceivably be developed as pad.
Can someone explain to me how you increase density that way? How does that work in that? We have one MHRVs at one zone so what does that look like in the MHRV1 as a pad?
I was not aware that there was not a height limit in the underlying zone.
No, and I think that's a function of the type of housing that you typically see in a mobile home park, which is, they're they're road mobile. They have to pass under bridges, things like that.
But I'm just asking, like, if I want to do a pad in the MHRV1 and I get a density bonus, what does that look like?
Yeah, well.
I think it would just be like, if you have a plot of land and you've got minimum size that you can work with, and you want to do a cluster of studios 1, 2, you've got to calculate how much, room.
It would look
for
like park
structure.
models. You would do park models on.
Well, that's my question too, because it
No.
says to match the housing in the underlying zone. So that's either,
No, I think it also allows MHR, that one allows for multifamily.
no, not in my reading online.
Well,
I've looked at our code online.
So you could have a variety of small mobile home type units.
Okay, that's part of my question too.
Yeah, I mean.
And then I didn't know if the park model qualified, and if so, how many square feet it was, because I was like, well, do we want to keep someone from doing that if it's less than 475? I don't know how many it is.
I think they can be less than 475, but where we've gone to 275 square feet.
Like, I don't know if those ones on Mill Creek, what size they are. I didn't know if anybody had hoped to have
I haven't
those in
gone
the
and
mix.
measured them.
Okay.
And, one thought I have is that you could easily sidestep this issue and not get hijacked onto it if you want to delete the MH1 from the pad. It might be that it's just not efficient given land prices anymore.
It was just unclear to me as I marked in the document reading it, if it was in there or not, because it was part of it and not part of it.
It's
And I
in
was
there.
trying to wrap my head around what that would look like,
And a part of what this ordinance has done is said, look, we're going to give people the creativity to try to develop higher density development, and developers are going to come up with creative ways to try to meet what we require of them. It doesn't have to be in this zoning district. It doesn't have to be in the MH1 district. There are other zoning districts that might be more appropriate. And the other thing is, you know, that affordable housing units, I mean, not affordable, modular and mobile home housing units are changing. And there are a lot of things now and in the future that didn't exist a few years ago. You know, you have stacking, you have all kinds of things. So, and I'm not arguing either for or against this, but if this is a sticking point, if design features for what do we do in a mobile home park are going to hold this up, I would say strike this. We can always come back to it later, but let's not have our...
Again, my point was I was just trying to clarify with the group, was it your intention that it be in there, and do you understand that the underlying zone doesn't allow for anything other than...
mobile homes.
And recreational, I'm going to use the wrong term, parks. So I wanted to make sure that was the intention when people put it in there.
I think that's a good question for the council members to answer.
Personally, I'm comfortable with taking Chris's suggestion. We can always add it later on.
I mean, I know we're all very protective of that zone, and if it allows more people in with smaller units potentially, I mean, I'm not opposed to that. I just wanted to have the discussion because I wasn't sure if everybody was clear that it was in there and what people were envisioning.
Is there one zone just down on
Grand Oasis.
Grand Oasis, okay.
Gosh, I didn't even, that was just not even on my radar. Thank you.
There's a lot, yeah.
Well,
The list
and
is long.
I don't want to, I don't want to trigger unintended consequences. And if this hasn't been studied carefully, then I think you should
I
strike
think that
it.
should be an excluded zone at
Is there
this time.
a consensus around that? We can always come back to it later.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't want to miss an opportunity either if it has great potential to help. It was just a little bit disturbed that, yeah, anyway. And like a similar question is, I have a feeling we had one brief discussion about the C3 and that it's not in there because people decided, oh, well, who would do a pad in a C3? It wouldn't make sense financially. However, I just wanted to raise that again in case for some reason, I think at least one person thought it was in there. So as we discuss the C3 and people potentially putting housing upstairs, I'm not a developer, I don't know how to do the math. I did not know if there was a conceivable way that a pad would make sense in the C3 upstairs, and so I just wanted to make sure I was clear if that had viability there and it belonged in here or not.
And thank you for pointing that out, because I assumed that it was in there. We're trying to get as many zones as possible, so I don't have opposition to having C3 in there. Is there a reason why? Was it just financially?
Well, it's your central business district, and it may not be an appropriate use of land that's within that zone. So you have to decide at policy judgment, is that how you want to use your central business district? And it may not be, I don't know, Summer, have you had that? I know that you and Jeff have had those discussions previously when we talked about past drafts of
ultimately the reason why housing wasn't allowed on the ground floor was that it does keep your opportunity for your sales tax revenue to happen in that area. But I guess if a developer found a piece of property in the C3 and they could make the numbers work, I mean, if the option is available, I mean, I don't know if they would utilize it, but you at least make it available if they wanted to try.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical of how many would try, given the high land prices.
But they don't necessarily have to, that's the thing. They may though, if the opportunity's not available.
It's just
they
an
don't have the
option, yeah.
ability to even try, but if they found a piece of property in the C3 that nothing else seemed to work on, but they could make the numbers work, I don't know.
I mean, so as it stands, we could potentially have retail space at the bottom and then a pad development on top. I mean, I am
Absolutely do
all
that.
for that, so.
I mean, I just
Is
feel like
anybody opposed to adding C3 then?
Well, so let me get this clear. Currently, someone could effectively do a pad, but without the income requirements, because there's no minimum unit size in C3
They
for
could do it above the
residential
ground
units
floor,
above
correct.
the ground floor.
Correct.
So if they wanted to do commercial use ground floor residential above, there would be no real advantage to pad.
There could be, depending on your
Minimum square
parking.
footage.
Well, your minimum square footage, there's really not, I mean, you've got the minimum home size of 500 square feet. So if you change that to whatever you change it to, the one bonus is that if you do have it as one parking space per unit, that could potentially make the parking a little bit easier to achieve for those units above the ground floor.
I have a related question, and this is sort of,
Well, can we just finish on, I mean, can we have conclusion on this one, or is it related to it?
it's related to all of them, I think.
Go for it.
So, purpose, as applicable to PAD developments, the provisions of this chapter supersede any conflicting or inconsistent provisions which may be found elsewhere in Moab Municipal Code. So basically, if we allow a PAD in C3, then that, it
So you're
allows it
saying
to
they'd lose the
supersede
opportunity
the
to do
ground
smaller?
floor commercial requirements.
If they're in conflict.
That's right. I mean, this is essentially an overlay zone. It is a standalone set of requirements that will, that allow, or set the contours for allowing higher density, affordable housing in the zones where we're gonna allow it. And so, yeah, there's always that risk of an unintended consequence about, you know, are we opening up something that maybe you don't want in a particular zoning district?
So then back to C3.
I'm not okay with C3.
Okay.
I feel like there's enough variables in this that are going to get worked out in the application that I would rather avoid the unintended consequences in C3 at this point.
Like, is the concern that if it overrided other code, that someone, by being allowed to do a pad on an upper story in the C3, that they would no longer have the option to do smaller units on the
No, my
upstairs?
concern is that we've identified that there's a number of competing uses for our existing commercial zones. And so I realize that housing is a dominant one, but there's other ones as well. And there is actually a lot more residentially zoned land in the city than there is commercial. So while we may be restricting lodging, I also don't want it getting eaten up with housing.
So Chris, is it a possibility to have it available in C2 if there's commercial space on the bottom floor? Is that?
Oh, in C2?
I'm sorry,
do you mean
C3.
C3.
I'm sorry.
Well, you can do it any way that you want. I mean, if you just simply enact PAD and say that you can do it in C3, what that means is you could do housing on ground floor units in the C3, PAD housing units on the ground floor in the C3 zone. And so you'll have to decide whether that's something you want.
So what I'm asking is, would it be possible to make it so that you could only have pad housing on the second floor?
You could, and that may be a valid policy choice where you're preserving commercial space on the ground floor and allowing affordable units on second, third stories.
I mean, I'm talking to business owners downtown, if they had the option to, I mean, Lima's in particular, like they could open up.
Now, they already do without a pad right
But
now.
at 500 square feet,
Right.
not 275. So that just opens up more housing. So, I mean, and I don't know.
I think if you preserve the retail space or the commercial space on the ground floor, what you do with that second floor, if you could put 4 units above a shop that's 1,000 square feet, it's 4 units.
I don't think Lima would be able to do it because of parking. I think that's what Summer was saying.
But we don't make these choices for one particular.
No, I mean,
Business
never,
owner.
yeah. So I would love to put that out there. We retain retail at the bottom and we allow for a pad housing on top.
So keep it in the C3.
If we can change, so it doesn't, we don't eliminate retail.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing you saying is that, well, I hear a couple of people saying, I hear one person saying no, and I hear some other people saying maybe we could do it on the second floor. Is there a straw poll in favor of pad units on the second floor in C3?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make it so.
Oh, to have the power to do that.
Sorry.
Okay, are there other?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, but
That's all right, that's what I'm here for.
it's got to happen sometime. So I watched the March 6th meeting that you guys had, and I heard discussion definitely about the primary resident issue, but I just wanted to clarify, in case I missed something, was there group resolution on the fact that the market rate units should not be limited to primary residents? I just wanted to make sure.
I was going to bring that up too, because I was definitely interested in having that.
Can I weigh in on that? Because I wasn't at the workshop. You know, market rate units are, they're sort of the bread and butter that's going to make a lot of these developments fly if they get built or when they get built. And the ability of people to, you know, rent out their unit if they're going to move because they change jobs. I mean, the ability to rent your unit is, rather than selling it, it's one of those kind of important property rights that goes with home ownership. And if you encumber a market rate unit by saying you have to be owner occupied, that might simply restrict.
But couldn't you rent to another primary resident?
Well, you could, but maybe you don't want to go that way. The unit is still available. It's prohibited for overnight lodging. So if somebody moves away because they change jobs, they're going to be leasing it out to someone.
Or it's a second home if the primary is not required.
Yeah. And so, well, and the question is, I mean, do you want to be that strict, or because?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah.
Council, what do you think?
I personally would like to be that strict.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm interested.
Okay.
So market rate units need to be.
Kaylin wants to say
owner-occupied.
something.
Sorry, Kaylin.
Well, I would like to be that strict, but I think you raise a good point that it may impact the value of it in such a way that changes the economics of the development. But I'm not sure how much it changes the value. And I think that's something that we may be having future discussions on.
Well, market rate is market rate, right? It doesn't matter
But if you're, I'm sorry.
Or are you just thinking what someone living here could offer at market rate is maybe going to be half of what someone from out of town might offer in that sense?
Yes, I think by limiting the population of available buyers or renters to that of people that make Grand County home versus the entire population of capital-rich people looking for second homes, you do change the potential sales price.
And I personally, I'm okay with that because the point is trying to get residents into housing. So, and if that reflects that that house costs less, then that's going to open up the opportunity for somebody to buy that locally.
I totally agree. It's just that what may pencil for, then the developer may say, if you do that, then I need 40% market rate as opposed to 30%. And that's a question that I don't know.
Right.
So let's make a decision and move on. And I think whatever the majority of the council feels is good on this item, we should take that and move forward. So
Straw poll, majority in favor?
the question is primary residence, yes or no, for the market rate units?
Yes.
I'm in favor of yes.
No.
Yes.
Okay, so it's
Okay.
yes, yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Ronnie was kind of going through her list.
Oh.
Yeah, but I'll be here till midnight.
Well, guess what? If we never discuss the stuff at meetings, this is what happens. So Chris, you said you felt like there had been some conclusion drawn about the notion of subletting, but I wasn't clear on what that is. What is that?
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like the document still contradicts itself a little bit.
Well, what I took from your workshop was that if a person who has an owned unit, affordable unit, or a leased affordable unit, that you wanted to make that allow them to to lease or sublease to eligible persons who are who would otherwise be qualified for affordable housing. So if somebody, went on a mission for a year or something like that they could lease out their unit to someone else who also qualifies without losing it. And that's I think what I drew from that discussion. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I'm going to do.
And then I assume that would be okay as long as it was more than 30 days, right?
Right, and that's crystal clear. I mean, and I've said this probably multiple times in the document that overnight lodging, not okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no. It's just when you talk about subleasing, I mean, I don't know why anyone would sublet for less than 30 days, but they might try, yeah.
Well, if you were like a cat guide or a grand
Yeah,
guide, you
exactly.
might let a friend house sit, but that wouldn't be subletting. And then they
Okay.
might pay you beans or something. What else do you have?
Yeah, I gotta get my document to go down here. Just a quick question, one that I asked in the list, and I didn't get an answer, so I just wanted to make sure we were solid here. I think it's good in the OPP that it went down from 100 or whatever, one of the requirements went down from 150% to 40%. But not being a housing expert, I just wasn't sure, is the 40 come out of some other housing standard, or just to make sure we didn't, somebody originally apparently thought 150 was fine, so I'm just trying to make sure, is 40 fine? Yeah.
I can't remember where the origin of that was, but the issue was to qualify for a sales unit, you have to have limited means. And if you've got a lot of cash in the bank, you don't need a subsidized, affordable unit. And so you want to put a cap on the net assets that are available to a household. And for some reason, we had that in an earlier draft, and the provision was far too generous, in my opinion. We could probably reduce it further still, but that was my effort to try to arrive at some measure of net assets that would be the maximum that you could have relative to the purchase price of a unit. And that could include things like, consider like a retired family, two retirees, they have some retirement savings and they want to buy an affordable unit, but they're not rich people.
For what it's worth, USDA's requirements, asset requirement, is that you can have no more than 15,000 liquid assets in the bank, like cash in the bank, after the purchase of a unit. So
Well, my
like if you
larger
had
point is, yeah.
150, you would be required to put all but 15,000 of it for
Into
the
equity.
purchase.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing
I
for
think
one
what
number
we're
over
saying-
another. I'm just trying to make sure the numbers are based in someone has studied this and decided this is fair, because I don't want
Sounds
someone
like
to
it's
say,
Chris's
I have
number
50
for-
and it's
my
not
number,
fair,
and,
or.
no pride of authorship there. If
Yeah.
you want something different,
I just didn't know from the housing world, like you guys who work with housing,
Maybe
is
too
That's
is
what I'm
that-
saying, the
yeah.
housing world is 15 for USDA,
Okay,
15,000.
okay.
there a
So for-
majority that
No, I was just trying to check, like, it's 40 too low, but it sounds like it isn't. Okay,
40 would be high
High,
with
would be
respect to
higher.
USDA.
okay.
So if you want,
But there are other funding programs. If somebody were to be doing a conventional loan, like if they were to purchase a studio and they were able to land a conventional loan, they might actually qualify for conventional financing for a loan of 150 if they got,
right.
or like VA or FHA.
One thing I can do, I can study that further. I can get back to you with some other recommendations.
I don't know that it concerns anyone else. I was trying to understand kind of where it came from and just trying to make sure that,
The 40 didn't concern me.
okay, that is fine. That's
Because I
kind of what
thought
I
it was
needed to
like
know.
high, but I think it's one of those things where if you're low income and you're pre-qualifying for a loan, there are going to be restrictions based on your funding, and 40 is big enough that there's no loan that you could get as a low income person where
That would kick you out.
Yeah, that would kick you out.
Yeah, and then I know there had been some discussion at one point, I don't know if this was a more concern for people when the R2 was included, but I didn't see anything about a sunset clause, so I didn't know if that was something anybody wanted or not.
The nice thing, well, first off, the nice thing about local government is this didn't work, you can repeal it 6 months from now. I mean, I don't know that there's, we haven't really done sunset clauses in our past practice here. When we didn't like the way something was working out, we repealed it. I'm not sure that it's necessary, given how responsive you guys are when you see a problem. You can.
So the reason for that is that the county's high-density overlay, they did a sunset clause, and that was really favorable with the community. So do other council members want to implement a sunset clause, or no?
Not if we're removing R2. I feel like it was of significant value if we were doing PAD and R2, but without it, I'm okay counting on future councils to.
Yeah, general. Okay, great. Thanks for that, Ronnie. I know that
That's
was a
helpful.
burning question.
And then one is just tied to Tawny's question when she was asking about people's ability to qualify. And this is, again, just more what people were envisioning and want. So I understand the, retired 5 years of full-time. I don't know that we'll face this, but I didn't know if anybody was worried about someone being kicked out, maybe they work full-time until they're 65, and then they're like, well, I can still work, but I can't handle the full-time days so much, so I'm going to scale back, and they scale back to fewer hours. That would disqualify them since their last years of work, maybe weren't full-time. So I didn't know if that was a concern or not, but it just occurred to me. I don't know.
One thing and that sort of brings up another issue, which is that, and this came up in your workshop, people asked, who's going to monitor this? How's this going to be implemented? What you need to appreciate is that there will be staff resources that are going to need to be employed developing a program, developing rules. The ordinance allows staff to develop a program and rules and to make recommendations to you. I mean, these are detailed eligibility mechanisms, and I expect that there are going to be things that we haven't that we haven't fleshed out yet that are going to have to be developed as part of that program. I don't know
It's probably safe to say that the time it takes to develop a parcel, even if it's a 1-unit parcel, is at least 6 to 8 months. So the question is this council comfortable with passing this, knowing that an application for a PAD would trigger that next step, which is the developing the process, knowing that it would either be in-house or contracted to HASU or another qualifying affordable housing qualifier.
Yeah, the impacts depend on how many of these we see. I mean, if there
That's
are,
the question, is this council okay with that procedure step following?
And then I just had,
Hold on, yes, yeah, okay.
and then just 2 more quick things. The solar access portion is something that some of you understand in more detail than I do, so I just wanted to check if people felt like that language was solid or if it needed anything.
The which, sorry?
Oh, the language having to do with solar access and, yeah.
I think it's a little soft. I think it's going to require interpretation.
and I will tell you,
But I think that's true of a number of things in this ordinance.
Yeah.
One of the things that the council should be aware of is, in fact, I talked with Kalen about this historically, was that, I went through this exercise. We can develop geometric standards where we dictate a setback relative to the lowest elevation of the angle of the sun on the winter solstice, and use that as a metric for determining setbacks. And maybe we should do that citywide. I felt like that requirement might.
Nora, you hear that?
I felt like that
Welcome
requirement.
to the job. Welcome to the fire hose.
Yeah, that's right. I felt like that requirement, might add to the cost of developing pad units, and add another level of review complexity, and that maybe that's something that we could look at citywide later, and not purely in connection with pad. And so the standard that you have is a soft one that gives you some discretion. For example, if somebody were developing a pad development right next to somebody's boundary in a way that would limit their solar access, you could conceivably alter the setback to try to protect that. And I consciously did not include a standard that says thou shalt not interfere with, thy neighbor's.
But if we get to that at some point with zoning, then we can always amend the plan to reflect to whatever code is. So the question to this council is, are we okay moving forward with soft but firmly placed, a soft, firmly placed item about solar access in the document?
I think we did, does anyone remember, we made that one of the items on our priority under the work plan, I think, right? One of the things we wanted to address, height, and I think there's a whole list of items.
There's a fire hose. I don't know if it was on the work plan. Solar access was, I don't remember if solar access is an item on the work plan.
These are good questions.
Okay, well, someone can look that up later, but, okay, and then just the final thing was noting Chris's point about how, there are fiscal impacts to all of this, so I didn't know how much, when we thought we might get to the point where we were seeing some of those, if we have to touch on that when we get to this part of the budget that's related to this.
Good point, so,
I may have answered my own.
Do you want to have further discussion about that, or just kind of warning?
Maybe someone can help remember that, only because it sounded like, there's the admin enforcement end, and there's also the question, if you do actually get to the point where you're considering waiving impact fees, then you have to cover that somewhere else in the budget.
Yeah. Thanks, Ronnie. Thank you for going through your list.
Good catch, good catch. So Chris, eligibility, I was confused because the eligibility paragraph begins by saying all affordable housing shall be leased or sold to persons who meet the eligibility requirements of this chapter. In other words, that's the statement that says people who are going to buy these things or lease them have to meet certain eligibility requirements. And then when you go on to the next paragraph, the eligibility requirements are defined for people who are going to occupy the housing as opposed to lease or buy them. So I was confused right off the bat. In other words, our three items of eligibility that we've been talking about for an hour now are all about who occupies it, but it doesn't really specifically say who can actually buy or lease. But maybe there's another clause down here that maybe this is, you're out. You can't sublease, basically. So
Well, okay, so we're mixing several different things, but the eligibility criteria are your household has to have a combined household income of 100% AMI or less.
Okay, but this is eligibility to occupy.
That's right.
Which is not necessarily the same thing as purchasing.
Well, you're
You either buy it or you rent it.
You're going to buy it or you're going to lease it.
You're going to lease it.
We may be.
You can't sublease it. Maybe they equate to the same thing. Maybe that's what I.
Well, we've already established that you can sublease rental units to eligible persons. Eligibility, that was something we talked about a few minutes ago, but eligibility is defined by having modest income below 100% for your household, employed full-time in Grand County, at least one person, disabled or retired from an employer in Grand County, and it has to be your sole place of residence. Those are listed in the conjunctive. I can try to wordsmith that language and make it clearer for you. If you'd like.
Does anybody else on the council have heartburn? No. They share the same heartburn as Mike?
I guess
It's a matter of different conditions for who could lease or buy as opposed to who could occupy. And what you're trying to tell me, I think, is that there's no effective difference.
Yeah, I think you can think of substituting everywhere it says occupy with buy or rent, I think.
Maybe it's the same thing.
I can try to make that clear.
I grant you it's a pretty nitpicky sort of thing. So the second thing, so I'll let that one go, thank you. The other thing, when you got to the table, the 30, 50, 20% table and so forth, there was a clause in there saying that for developments of 6 units or less, the council had discretion to declare exactly how many units were market rate and how many were to be affordable and so forth. And that much is great. But I'm just saying for suppose you have a division with 8 units, for example, so you wouldn't qualify for 6. So what do you do? I'm just trying to get you to, I'm a mathematician, all right? When you say 30% of 1.5, it doesn't come out to be a whole integer number.
Yeah. Do you want me
I
to
want
round
some
high
sort
or
of
round
rule
low?
to tell me how to round it up or down. It's either some number over 1/2 or less than 1/2 or greater than 0, blah, blah. I mean, you can define it a lot of different ways, but I think you should define it.
Tell me what you want. You know, what I've done here is for small developments, which we're probably going to see a few of them, for pad developments containing up to 5 units, the city may approve an alternative mix of units, but in no case shall the number of market rate units exceed 1. So we've established a market rate floor there, or ceiling, I should say.
How about take out the council determine and just keep it as, you can't have more than 1?
Okay.
Under a certain, that number.
Okay.
Which was what, 4?
It was 5.
5, because then
5.
20%.
I was wondering-
But the question I think you're asking is that if you have a development of a certain size number of units and it doesn't work out to an even number, should you round high or round low? And I don't have a preference on that. Tell me what the council's preference is. Do you want to?
Or to round high.
And that would be to
Favorite
round.
market? Does anybody disagree with Karen round high?
Well, I will add, it would work. I mean, we're talking about small potatoes here, but ordinarily, if you want the whole number approximations to approximate the rounded number approximations, any remainder, in other words, any remainder from 0 to 0.5 would round down, and anything over 0.5 would round up. That's the usual thing. So that would make it.
So we can use math.
There's a lot of math in the council meeting tonight.
Well, I mean,
Good. So
I
good
mean,
math.
that's just, yeah, do we want to round up or down or pick a number or whatever?
I move that we round up if it's 0.5 or greater and down if it's not.
Does anyone have?
Rounding.
Does that bother anyone?
Just rounding. General.
Does anyone oppose that way of figuring out the solution? No?
No,
So,
that's
great.
fine.
Good job,
Okay,
Mike.
I'll make that change.
That's great.
Can
That's all I got.
Oh, I'd like to follow up with that in this example, someone could do a 275 square foot studio as one of the units, and then 4 3-bedroom houses as the market rate units. I'm wondering if it should be based on number of bedrooms or total square footage of the development, rather than just on a unit basis.
Wait, but didn't we determine that there was still a number cap? So if you did a 5, you
Yeah.
could have 1 market.
Right, but
So-
right,
So
one
yeah, you
market,
could do
yeah.
4 studios and 1 big house. Who cares? It's units. I mean, do you care? I'm sorry, that was an assumption.
Okay, no, I'll drop that. What I do care about is that it appears that the preliminary plat land use authority is the planning commission. Is that correct?
I think that's what we did to try to encourage streamlined, yeah, this goes back to one of the earliest drafts of PAD, which was to have planning commission be the land use authority at preliminary, and the council land use authority at final. And you can tell me if you want that or don't want that.
I'm not comfortable with that at this stage of development of this and with the number of unintended consequences that I think will become apparent as creative solutions are proposed. And I think for the time being, the city council should be the land use authority at preliminary plat. And we see how it goes.
Who agrees with Kalen?
That's not a bad idea. We can always change it to make it less restrictive later on. Right.
I will say that you've got a very motivated and talented planning commission that cares about their job and wants to see this process succeed. And so we ought to give them things to do. And I'm also cognizant of the council workload. I mean, consider how much time we're spending on this, but
Well, and
that's just,
developers, it requires an additional, as you know, like getting on the agenda for council and then planning commission, then council. So you're at least without any hiccups, a month and a half, just waiting, as a developer. But it sounds like you're okay with that. You're okay with that, Ronnie?
I think maybe the criteria is what Kalen is bringing up here is in the beginning, as he says, there could be unintended consequences, which launches this into legislative territory. What did we intend versus what we've actually enacted legislatively? And that's why we might want to see it ourselves. After things settle down, all right, then we've got a set of rules that and it becomes an administrative matter and something that the Planning Commission would be the perfect organization to rule on
Other
that.
council members, do you agree or disagree?
I'm fine with letting the planning commission do their job.
So am I.
I can see it could be confusing, so maybe it's just helpful for them to have one of our many attorneys present, when, at least initially when they have to do these in case, because I would think the first time you do it, you're gonna have questions. So maybe that's helpful. I don't know.
So keep it as is, but lend an attorney? Is that something that y'all would be comfortable with?
I would be comfortable with that.
And on a staff level? Yeah? The attorney.
I mean, these are going to
Three
be
horsemen that we have today.
attorney-heavy documents. I mean, when we're talking about the composition of the drafting of the LURA, which is the land use restriction agreement, those are all things that you're going to approve, and that's going to come to you at final. And development agreements, all that kind of stuff. I mean, these will be contract-heavy things to implement. And that all has to come at the council level, not planning commission level. So something else to weigh.
Okay, there's consent, it doesn't seem like you're gonna be happy with this decision, but I think everybody else is.
I agree with the first part of that statement, and we'll see.
So moving forward with planning commission being the first to see it. Yeah,
Fine with that.
with assistance from an attorney, okay.
And that's also where the public hearing would be held.
Tracy wants to say something.
So to Kalen's first question, Chris, I have like a mixed up version of, I think, 3 documents here, but 1768050 performance standards. Item A, affordability concept. And it says, so it's about the mix. All applicants shall provide housing which contains a combination of 1-bedroom or studio, 2 bedrooms, or 3-bedroom units.
Yeah, the revised draft that was circulated to council changed that to say that applicants are encouraged to include a mix. And that was specifically, it was to give you an aspirational standard, but not a hard standard. The mayor pointed out that someone might want to come in and say, look, I just want to do studios, or I just want to do 2-bedroom units. And you might find that to be appropriate given the site and what the needs of the community are. So,
Like, for example, Moab Flats is, what is that, 6 1-bedroom units? Purple Sage is 6 1-bedroom units, is that right?
yeah, so it may not be appropriate to mandate you have to have a mix of 1, 2, and 3, or studio, or, so it's a soft standard.
Squishy little Jigglypuff.
Well, we're encouraging people to have
I
a
think we
mix.
said,
Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, I would just like the sentence reworded a little, and I can make a suggestion to you so it doesn't make it sound like I'm encouraged to do studios to 3 bedrooms, but really it's just a suggestion, and I could do all 6 bedrooms. So I just wanted to double check. When we talk about the pad, we're pretty much talking from studio to 3-bedroom, right? Or are we talking about 6-bedroom? The wording was vague to me.
It seems. And I'm just going to tell you that I cannot draft for every conceivable eventuality. There will be discretionary situations where you're going to be confronted with, we can't anticipate every possible scenario. All we can do is try to,
oh, wait a minute. I think
Anticipate
I
the things
understand
we're
what
gonna
you're asking. Because if you had 6 bedrooms in 1 unit, and 1 unit requires 1 parking spot, is that the concern?
No. Never mind. I thought this whole time when we were discussing the pad that you guys ideally wanted a mix of studios, 1, 2, 3 bedrooms, and
Yes,
that was a pad. But the way this is written, it just says you're encouraged to build something in that size range. But basically then to me, if I'm reading and I'm like, oh, well, maybe they kind of prefer that, but I could do 6 room, all of my units, I'm gonna build 3 units and they're all gonna have 6 bedrooms. And that's my pad.
Yeah.
So I don't know, is there a maximum? Maybe
I mean,
not.
so then we're creating a dorm-style living situation.
Well, but like,
I mean, you can fix it.
already do that. I don't know. I mean, now I'm doing a little gymnastics here.
Do I get a density bonus for doing that? Yeah.
My brain's about to.
Well, you can
And it
just
doesn't
build a
provide a
single.
mix, I mean, if, as a developer, if you're gonna make all your money renting, you would, 3-bedroom units, then you're gonna build to what you're gonna make the most money. So we're gonna end up possibly, and each one I agree is gonna be different, but conceivably, we could end up with a whole bunch of 3-bedroom units in pads, or a whole bunch of studio. Anyway, I thought that was a really good approach to getting a mix of.
To mandate a mix of 1, 2, and 3.
It seemed like it.
Yeah.
So you can't just do studios, but like I don't know. I'm trying not to have opinions.
This one's difficult, for sure. Like, I hadn't even thought about that one, thanks.
I like 6 bedrooms, even though I have 1.
Maybe there could be a no more than 3-bedroom unit. Units,
Is there a preference? I mean,
units with up to 3 bedrooms. Now that you said that.
I only raised it because it was vague, so.
And then I still think that, what does the council think? The rest of the council think about
I mean,
that?
I would have been fine if it said, applications should include a combination of X, Y, and or Z, and then they can choose 2 elements that they want. But, I hear you. Somebody might want to do all studios, and maybe that's okay.
Or all 1-bedrooms.
Yes, what if somebody, so what if somebody wants to do a 6-plex with all 2 bedrooms?
Yeah, that's not bad.
Okay.
That's not
All
bad.
2 bedrooms, all 1-bedroom, all studio.
So then, but do we want to put a limit on it?
But I would
yeah,
say
yeah.
limit to 3 bedrooms.
All right.
Because then otherwise, it gets a little bunky or it gets a little flashy. 3 bedrooms is.
Well, and I do get given the concern we've had with.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. Especially if the parking is per unit and not per bedroom.
We haven't gotten to that yet.
Well, if it's per bedroom and not per unit, then the unit size probably doesn't matter. Because I don't know that it would, that was it. In my mental gymnastics, it doesn't seem. Okay, so where are we at right now? Where
Okay,
are we?
well, I got your comment on the maximum number of units. I'm leaving the mix of units, or the maximum bedrooms at 3. The mix of units is still discretionary with the developer. We like to encourage a mix. Is that?
Good, everybody? Okay. Should we do parking?
Yes, so what do you want to do with parking?
What does council want to do?
I want flying cars.
They'd be noisy.
Jetsons.
The Jetsons aren't.
So Emily, are we saying that it's a possibility to have only 1 parking spot for a 3-bedroom?
It is up to you all to decide.
I'd like to ask for a data input from you guys, and for our various sizes of units. Typically, if you can quote a number, I mean, they're typically going to be occupied by a person with 1 car, or 2, or 3. In other words, if every bedroom is going to be occupied by an adult who's got a car, then I can see the generous allocation. But I suspect that that's not going to be the case all the time, that the first, you might have a couple of cars, and after that, not so many. So, I mean, can you guys give me any data on that?
David made a good point earlier. Are we building housing for cars, or are we building housing for people?
Building.
And maybe you want to say, single bedroom units, 1 space. Anything larger, 2 spaces max. I don't know. What do you think?
I lived in 2-bedroom apartments for a long, long time. And there was 1 adult and 2 kids, and we got 1 parking space. And that was pretty much how it was through the entire development. and there were 3-bedroom apartments in many of the apartments that I lived in. There were extra spaces for visitors, and if you had 2 cars, you parked in one of those.
Tracy, maybe technician.
Up and down. So.
Just stay.
I should. So,
Stay.
the way it's drafted right now, I'm more comfortable than when it said 2+ bedrooms required 1.5 per bedroom. That meant that was 5 parking spaces for a 3-bedroom unit.
Right.
That's just ridiculous.
That's crazy.
So I think maybe developers could live, it's still too many parking spaces, I think, but Chuck made a good point today that, you know, some of these developments are gonna be on tight streets. There's not gonna be street parking as, you know, maybe 2-3 blocks away, so you're not parking. And maybe that's the reality, is that you gotta walk a block to get, you know, back to your apartment. But I think, you know, it's feasible to do it as 1 space per bedroom.
I'm not comfortable going lower than that, but I might be the only one.
You are or are not?
I'm not.
Okay, so one
per-
space per bedroom. Okay, so Ronnie is good. 1 space per bedroom?
1 per bedroom.
1 per bedroom?
I think it's a lot, but I'm okay with it.
I'd be comfortable with a little less.
I would too.
Question for Tracy. So it seems like many people live in shared households but would prefer to have their own space, but there's a lack of studios and 1-bedrooms. And so PAD allows a bit more inventory in that, then maybe there will be less 3-bedroom units that have fully occupied with
Sharing,
adults. Would you
right.
say that's?
I would say that's probably accurate, yeah. Just more inventory.
There is an option too where you could require a guest parking spot for every X amount of units. So if you did 1 per bed.
1 per unit.
1 per unit,
And then-
plus 1 spot per 4, 3.
What does our code say? Are we speaking
But
of
Ronnie
guest
is saying not comfortable. I mean, we are still a
I mean-
car-centric world. And a couple's gonna shack up in a studio. Either besties or newbies.
And they'll deal with the parking.
And they'll deal with the parking, yeah.
I mean, we're not trying to make the perfect scenario for every single household.
So the reason why 1 per bedroom feels like a lot is when you get to 3 bedrooms. So what about 1 per bedroom, not to exceed 2 per unit? I mean, that's what code is right now. So you're not getting any parking density unless you're 1 bedroom or studio.
Be fine with me.
Is that a good compromise, or?
I just still tend to see 1 to 2 people in our housing situation per bedroom. And so to me, it's not responsible to go under 1 per bedroom.
Why is that? What's not responsible about that? Meaning it would impact people parking on the street?
Depending on where you are, or if you're right next to the commercial, it's going to get interesting. Yeah, I mean, to me, this is the long term. This is what brings you to resident parking permits, and it just feels like some of the burden should be shared with neighbors who are required to have more. Some of that burden should be shared by all development.
Okay, so every unit is required to have 2 parking spots right now. So that's the requirement that we're trying to match.
Like I said, I might be the only one who feels like it's important that it be 1 space per bedroom.
Well, no, because I'm trying to understand your equity. So then the equity would be 2 spots per unit. The difference is that if somebody's doing a 275 square foot studio, in terms of equity, it is a smaller unit. So.
And a studio would only be required to have 1.
And a studio would only require.
1 per bedroom, yeah, counts
Yeah.
as a bedroom.
And 1 bedroom, same. And it's
So-
2
But if we
bedrooms.
require a guest parking space per each unit, there isn't gonna be.
Oh, I was gonna say like per 4 or 5 units.
Yeah.
1 guest per 4
Whatever.
units.
But
So where are we
In
at now?
two-bedroom units, you're more than likely going to have two parents and a child. That's, or two children. It's,
Yeah, and if you
I mean,
use a three-bedroom
yeah.
unit, Tawny, I mean, that's most likely to be a family. It's not gonna be a group of buds who are hanging
You
out
don't think
together.
so? Three
No,
guides?
because those are not the people who are gonna
Six
qualify.
guides?
They're not gonna qualify.
they're not going to qualify.
They're not going to qualify.
You have to
They're
have a stable
joining,
household. A
won't
group of
qualify
roommates are
them.
not gonna
That's good.
qualify for affordable housing. It
Well, let me
just-
give you an example. Entrada has 4 parking spaces per unit. Last Thursday, I counted 32 vehicles, big trucks with trailers parked on the road, on the old hospital property and across the street in that 2-block area. So they have 4 parking spaces and people are still parked everywhere.
Okay, so the metric we're working on is 1 spot per bedroom.
I say we go with code.
2 per unit.
Oh, no,
Max.
I'm sorry, 2 max, like if it's a 3-bedroom, it'd be 2 max.
So 1 per bedroom, 1 per bedroom, 2 per max per unit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ronnie, does that feel?
I disagree, but that's fine.
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
in the
Is everybody
minority.
else in agreement with that parking ratio? Or do we have at least 3? 3?
Yeah.
You're okay with that, Mike?
With a max of 2, correct?
Yeah, okay, then that's what it is. Moving on. What else?
Any other comments?
Inflation rate, did we want to get to that?
I'd like to move on to new business.
It is 9:07. You want to talk inflation
Well,
rate?
no, I mean, I'm just, his punch list, I mean, are we going through it all tonight, or are
Oh.
we doing?
It's up to you all.
Yeah, it's your discretion.
The inflation rate, so it's right now it's at 3%, and that's what all other affordable housing deed restricted units are, that's the metric.
And I'm fine with that.
You're fine with that? Is anybody else not fine with that? Great, what else?
I wondered about using the formula, so for resale, like recalculating with the formula, using the new AMI, the AMI at time of sale, and using whichever is greater. Because if the AMI has gone up faster than the AMI, then potentially, then it's still affordable. But could
I
be
think you'd use AMI at time of sale,
we're talking about
That's what-
resale, right?
at time of resale. You would use the current AMI.
I thought we were talking about using,
Yeah, I mean, are we
You're
doing
talking
that,
about the
or is it
appreciation.
Buyers or the sell-
The appreciation
sellers or
rate
the buyers?
Yes.
for a sale unit, as structured now, it's 3% per year. It's capped at, and it could be less than that if the market.
regardless of the AMI at time of resale.
That's right.
So they may have drifted. AMI and the inflation may have.
Well, it's not inflation driven. It's purely,
Well, that's what I mean.
yeah, you're right. There could be a discrepancy
I mean,
between.
there's potentially 3 different mechanisms for calculating resale cost.
Yeah, one would be resale would just be inflation. One would be resale would be inflation plus some factor, like 3%. Or the other would be just a set factor, and it could be 3% or it could be less. The lower figure, I mean, if the market tanks, people may not get that 3% appreciation per year.
Right, but they will make at least 3% per year based on the current, when they purchase the unit.
That's right. In a rising market, they're gonna, the appreciation is capped. So you tell me what your preference is.
Keep it as it is, or change it as it reads?
Tracy, do you have an opinion?
Whatever gets us done.
So I'm familiar with the same thing Emily is. All the documents and projects I've ever done capped at 3%. And I guess that's the risk in, if it's a down market, then you don't share in equity, right? Because there's not any equity. So it's a risk for, the homeowner, home buyer. I mean, I wouldn't hate to see it a little bit higher than 3, say 4.
That would be so, like, very different from, like, what everybody else does, though, just so you know.
You could do inflation plus 3.
Inflation?
The rate of inflation, let's say inflation is 1% per year, and so you're just treading water when you're having the growth in the sales price tracking with inflation. So nobody's getting a net benefit from that, and then some factor on top of that.
No, you would benefit from inflation. That's the whole point of the 3% versus inflation. Like, market rate would be, like, you're benefiting from inflation.
Well, I mean, we're talking about CPI inflation, not just overall housing market inflation.
Yeah, but like
it would be tied to CPI rate of inflation, which, you know, right now is about 2% per annum. So if you added 3% to 2, your inflation would be capped at 5.
Okay.
That'd be a little more generous to the homeowner. Whether you want to do that or not, or do you want to just stick with 3?
Units will be out of the market faster, out of the
That's right.
affordable market faster. I mean,
Barring a downturn.
yeah, and you're still capped at what a new purchase or at low income could buy, except some are moderate, so.
You want to leave it at 3?
How about some fraction of the housing index price? I mean, if the housing index says that home prices appreciated 4% in a particular year, then by this ordinance, we offer them some, but not all of the 4% in an effort to keep it affordable and preventing windfall profits, but giving them some incentive to reap a net increase in equity.
I'm not sure that we should be in the business of, like, changing up patterns.
Well, that's a good point. I think what we're all driving at here is if you just hang a fixed number on there, there are certain circumstances where you're going to get unpredictable results.
I mean, that figure assumes that market gains will exceed 3% per year, and that's pretty easy to assume in the current market environment. That's the whole point of an appreciation cap, is to preserve affordability. We're selling these units to people who have lower incomes, and we want to keep them available to people who have lower incomes, and we're reducing the rate of appreciation that would happen as compared to market rate units.
And Chris, it's 3%. I mean, as it is written right now, it's 3% a year, correct? So like if you lived in it for 3
That's
years,
right.
you're
You
gonna
can realize, and the other
you
thing
can
is if you made
realize 9% and then also 10,000 and improvements.
That's right. So if you added a
Yeah,
bathroom
right.
or you did something like that, you could realize that kind of gain in market value.
Because the Western Region CPI last year was 3.6, so I'm not comfortable doing
Well,
0.6 on
is
top
someone-
of, I mean, potentially 9. I mean, no. So I am comfortable keeping it at 3% personally.
Okay.
That's good. I mean, otherwise, we can't, it's like Chris says, there's no way we can predict. I mean, we're interfering with the free market here, and no matter what we do, it's not always going to work.
Okay, all right, moving on. Any other, should I entertain a motion? Or are we gonna bring it back?
I'm going to bring it back to you.
Are you going to bring it back?
Okay,
You give me like 30 things to change, so I'm gonna bring it back to you.
all right, moving on, unless anybody has one final. All right, moving on.
Thank you.
Does
No, thank
everybody
you,
want
Chris.
2 minutes, or do we keep chugging along?
Just go.
Keep chugging along? Yes, everyone. New business, 10-1, confirmation of mayoral appointment of Corey Shirtliff to the City Planning and Zoning Commission. Corey, will you join us up here at the table, please? Corey and I had the pleasure of,
At long last.
thank you. That was good conversation for you to witness, though. Corey, will you introduce yourself to this council?
Yes,
for me?
hello.
Thanks.
My name is Corey Shirtliff. Been a resident of Moab until pretty recently. Was originally from Park City, Utah, and attended University of Utah.
Good man.
So what brought you to Moab?
Has been work. I currently work at Red Cliffs Lodge. I'm in their barn staff out there, and have been. This is my second season, although was delayed seasons. Was out in Colorado the year prior, and then at Sorrel River 4 years before that.
And why do you want to be on the planning commission?
During my career at University of Utah, I received a bachelor's in the city planning department there, and then went back and returned, got a bachelor's in the political science department and leadership minor. So it has always been my goal that in finding my career path that I'd be able to then participate in the community that I find myself in, and newly engaged, and so hoping to make Moab my home and really contribute to this area.
Do you have a house?
We are in the Portal RV area right now, and so we're in the market with Becky getting us set up.
Okay. Any other questions?
Your planning commission meetings are much shorter, just so you
Yes.
know, so do not be afraid.
I move to confirm the mayoral
they've been a
appointment of
lot
Corey
shorter.
Shirtliff to the Planning and Zoning Commission, effective immediately to complete the appointment formerly held by Laura Yule. His term will expire December 31st, 2020. He will be eligible for reappointment at that time.
I will second.
Thank you, Tani. Thank you, Ronnie. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Corey, thank you so much for sitting through. Welcome to the team. And I guess Nora, used to be Summer, but now Nora will be contacting you with a schedule of meetings to get psyched about.
Ronnie, nice to meet you.
Oh, really?
Good luck.
Yes.
Great.
Great. So fun.
Deck of stats. All right. Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for also sitting through this meeting so that when he comes home and it's 11, he's like, no, really, I've been in the meeting. Because we're still just on 10-2 now, so.
That's the best thing about these being broadcast.
We all tell
Yeah.
our spouses, right?
Exactly. Chad's really like, really? Check the Facebook
Do you
chat.
need an alibi, Joel?
Can't be at Woody's.
And Corey,
Gotta be at the meeting.
feel free to go home now, because there's nothing more planning that we have to talk about, so. Unless you want to
Not
stay.
that the rest of it isn't exciting.
Okay, moving right along, Chuck, where are we? 10-2, ordinance 2019-14, modifying wastewater connection and culinary water connection procedures, briefing and possible action, and I do want to say we are at 9:18, so, brief, put the brief in briefing.
I feel like I'm the closer on a baseball team, right? Go, go, go. The purpose of this is to get city employees out from installing private lines, as has been the practice in the past. We'll also simplify the billing process because homeowners will have their contractor install at their price.
Didn't we do this a year ago, Chuck? I mean, didn't we do this last year?
No.
Exactly this sort of thing? Because
No.
I remember
Talked about it.
reading about it. We just talked about it? We didn't actually do
Talked
it?
about talking about it,
Ah.
actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Sort of meta.
We did the impact fees last year,
Yeah.
but we didn't do the connection fees last year.
Okay.
It's been, I think, 10 years since it's been changed, is what we're discussing today.
Okay.
This format. We think it's a good thing. We worked with the treasurer's office for the billing process. We worked with water department, sewer department, Chris, who was the primary author, obviously. But if you elect to do this, we think it'll be a benefit to the city and to the, probably the biggest issue will be that some contractors will have to get up to speed on working in the road right of way.
So hopefully there'll be time allocated, staff time to be able to do that.
Yeah, we'll help them. We've talked about even having a workshop, where
All
we,
these contractors would more specifically be plumbers, right?
right.
So, I mean, they're,
Well, it could be plumbers, yeah. In all likelihood, that will be.
yeah.
How many contractors in the city roughly are we talking about who would do this kind of work? Can you count them on one hand? I mean,
Maybe two,
okay.
maybe,
Dave Cousins.
Oh,
maybe two.
There may be more, since they're gonna have more work.
That's right, this is a good thing for them. Because we still have to,
wait, I didn't understand that there would be a limited number of contractors that could do it.
I said that it could be up to 10. I didn't say they would be limited to that. We're talking about people who do this
Do it
type
now.
of work,
Got it.
right? Yeah. People who do this type of work is probably less than a dozen.
right now on a daily basis. But Chris is right, we may find others who want to expand into doing some of this business. But remember, the water department will still tie in the connections at the water mains and at the water meter. And our sewer crews will tie in at the main. So we'll still be involved and we'll still be doing inspections of the work. That's why there's still fees connected here with this.
From
Seems
the
like a-
development community, this is a good move.
Oh, no, it sounds like a great move overall. Thank you to the staff for suggesting it. I'm happy to make a motion unless somebody's got
Great.
something. I move to adopt ordinance 2019-14, an ordinance modifying wastewater connection fees and connection procedures.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Second.
Thanks, Tawny. Any further discussion?
So the outside city limits, there's this language about annexation,
Yeah,
which is,
we've had that.
What was that?
No, I knew you were going to ask about it.
Oh, I thought you got excited about annexation.
No, it's always been in our code, and I knew you were going to ask about it. But so go ahead.
Oh, we're getting slap happy.
So go ahead.
Go ahead and answer what you think he was going to ask.
so if entity north of the Colorado River asks for a sewer hookup, how soon can we legally annex them?
Oh, well, that's a whole nother thing. The historic, it's been built into our code for a long time that we would say, if you're getting municipal services, you're going to consent to annexation. It's been a little enforced because the annexation law has changed like 20 or 30 times since then. And the general rule is you got to consent to annexation, and we have never dragged people in, or at least very rarely that I can think of. What I could see happening is we could extend service outside city limits to someone, they sign a consent to annexation, but we don't actually annex them until it's physically and legally feasible to do so, and that might be in conjunction with other properties, or, as part of a bulk annexation. Answer your
And the short answer is faster than they can cross that river.
Yeah.
All right, so
My interest is that if we're facilitating development, say of a new hotel, we would probably, a big part of the benefit to the city is potentially annexing them so we can collect our taxes.
Commercial development requires city services, and city services should be annexed in, and that's what that policy in the ordinance facilitates.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I do have a question about impact fees, because I've been contacted by a few contractors.
Hold on, we're not at fees yet. We're actually.
No, it's under the,
Well, so we are going to talk
Sections,
about
okay.
fees, but that's at 10.3.
Okay,
So this
okay.
is just procedure, and sorry to cut you off,
No,
but
that's
I
fine.
would like to hold that question for procedure. Can we, is there a motion? Wait, we have a motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 10.3, Resolution 26, 2019, setting temporary water and wastewater connection fees pending completion of a master fee ordinance, briefing and possible action. I did ask Chuck to prepare a slide to show before and after.
Oh, thank you.
That's right. And the reason why we did this resolution after the ordinance
Thank
is if
you.
the ordinance didn't pass, there was no reason to change the fees. But since we're gearing up for a master fee resolution, which I think council knows that, this will give us an interim fee structure for these sewer connection fees until the master fee ordinance is adopted.
Yeah.
That's the reason for this resolution here. And so the current is in a gold, and the proposed fees, trying to keep it simple here, comparison, sewer connection fees within the city. Currently, the 4-inch sewer is $500, proposed is $670. Currently, a 6-inch sewer is $600, the proposed is $750. Sewer connection fees outside the city. And I think council knows, but just for clarity, we have some sewer and water outside the city, the same way that Grand Water and Sewer Agency has some water and sewer inside the city. It's just it's leftovers. And we try.
So there is an increase.
We try to avoid that.
There's an increase.
Yeah, well, in the sewer fees, there's an increase.
Okay.
Why? Yeah, I mean, what, yeah.
Yeah, these fees hadn't been updated for a long time, so I sat down with Obi, our sewer superintendent, and with Levi Jones, and went through all their costings for what the average fees would be, because the reason we are gonna do this is because we'll have to inspect the contractor's work, right? That's part of the increase.
Okay, so these fees weren't up, have not been increased in recent years. You
Correct.
said it's a long time.
Correct.
Okay.
It's been a long-
I
it's been a
just
long
feel like every meeting we increase fees. I do, that's how I feel,
And we do.
and we do. We just,
Because they haven't been increased in many, many years.
You know,
Costs go up.
yeah, there's the
when,
cost of
when,
maintain.
when was the last time these went up?
Well, the discussion today was it's been over 10 years. Because that's when the old system was in place. I don't know that I wasn't here.
Yeah.
But we had that discussion as staff today, and it was 10 years ago, is my understanding.
I'm just going to ask a clarifying question. So these numbers are different than what was in the packet. I think it was 550 and 650 outside the city and 500 and 600 in the city, if I'm looking at the right thing.
Well, this is,
Is it?
these are the sewer, and then the water, there's no change.
Yeah, okay.
Because the water connection fees have been changed in recent years. Is that correct?
Well, it's just, so the methodology by which those fees were established was not consistent between the two departments. The water system had a lot of the water fee is metal. It's water meters, it's valve taps, it's lines. It's not all labor. The sewer fees are primarily labor with some plastic for the tying in the sewer fees. And the water fees, I don't think have been updated. The other thing that's going to happen is we're doing the water rate study right now. And we thought that it wouldn't be worthwhile to do this because if we raised it a little bit, when we have their water rate study coming in, it'll be much better numbers than what we have now.
But the price of all that metal goes up from time to time, right?
Yes, it does. Valves.
But do you cover that in your water user fees, or is that covered in, obviously it can't be covered?
We try to cover it in the connection fees.
Oh, I see.
That's what we sat down, I sat down with Levi and we went over the cost of meters and the cost of
Okey dokey.
valve taps and that.
Can you go back to your slide about sewer? So in the packet, it says within the city, 4-inch sewer is 500, 6-inch sewer is 600. Outside the city, 4-inch is 550, 6-inch is 650.
Okay, then that's an error on my part,
For the current.
In here or in there?
in here in this. My apologies.
So this is
Yeah,
correct?
what's in the packet's
Okay, so just
correct.
keep this up. So currently, 4 is 500, proposed 4 is 500, currently 6,
You're saying,
6. So it's the same. Except outside the city, there'd be 550.
Isn't our resolution supposed to have the new numbers then?
it is.
It has the old ones. Oh.
That resolution, those are the numbers in the resolution.
Those numbers right there?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Oh, okay. So, it's because we're at 9:30.
Yeah, I understand.
So
I
in,
forgot the $50 off of each one of those.
For the
When you
currents.
asked me to make the slide, I just,
well, but the proposed
Is more than $50.
what you have as currently
oh,
in
gotcha.
the resolution.
So my concern would be, can we vote on it if the public hasn't seen it, since we have
Well,
numbers?
or you could just vote on it and then the fees stay the same.
I think that if you vote on the fees that are in the packet, you're fine, because we're gonna come back with a master fee resolution within 2 to 3 months.
I was gonna quietly nudge that idea out there. Thanks for nudging it for me. Is there a motion? Or do you want to discuss a little bit more? You were gonna say something.
No, that's fine, and because this is a more appropriate time. So I've heard from 3 different contractors that we are now requiring impact fees at the time of a building permit compared to when,
C of O.
yes, instead of the C of O, which has increased the amount of money that needs to be loaned, and it's a burdensome cost to.
Well, it's interesting you say that because we've received so much negative feedback about not requiring that to be paid at the building permit stage, because then people see it as like a hidden fee that comes at the very end when they're about to get their C of O, and we're like, oh no, but you owe so-and-so for your impact fees. The county's done it the way that we've changed it to it. In other words, we were trying to change it to be consistent with the county, so all the fees were up front and they didn't come later in the process.
And the other problem is people run out of money. Yep. And they're at C of O, they think they're done, and then they have to pay a huge impact.
But here's the other thing, it's only this little amount, it's not the full amount, because now contractors have to do it on their own.
No, but it's, so if you're doing a development.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars of impact fees upfront, even before the C of Os, before the houses are built. So, I mean, that's.
Before you put the shovel in the ground, you're out.
Yes.
That's right, and that's what you just approved in the ordinance.
Yeah.
Right.
And yes.
So, I mean, I'm bringing that out there because I've been contacted and I'm asking the questions because
Part of the problem was that we were missing them. So when people paid them at the time of connection, they would come in and they would get their connections done, but we weren't collecting the impact fee because it wasn't something that was done at the very beginning. So it wasn't until we got to the certificate of occupancy that we would double check and say, hey, did they pay their impact fees? This way, it's one shot, it's done. They pay it at the beginning and it's over. They don't have to come back at the end and pay an additional amount. Like Chris said, they've run out of money, something's happened. It's all taken care of and we don't have any reason to hold up their certificate of occupancy because of the impact fees.
The scenario was that someone would come in and get their building permit, pay their building permit fees at the treasurer's office. Then they'd come in for their C of O, sometimes almost a year later, because the building permit, you don't build it in a day, right?
Right.
As we all know. And the treasurer's office would be, okay, we'll figure out your impact fees now. They'd call me, they'd call Summer, we'd figure it out. And then they say, wait, they can't be that much money. Nobody told me about that before.
I remember you guys explaining
Yeah,
that
I mean,
to us.
it was unhappy customers because they thought it was late in the game. They didn't know full disclosure and all that.
So what about the contractors who do know and who are builders in town? I mean, that's unfair to say that they, don't know that they have to pay impact fees.
If they are building in Grand County, outside city limits, they have to pay them this way anyway. That is the process that the county has, so that it's no different than what they would do if they pulled a building permit in the county. Ours is, we're consistent across the board in how it's collected now.
And also, it wasn't always contractors who would come in to pay those fees. It was the homeowner. I mean, that's a pass-through cost.
And I
Typically,
think
the homeowners would come in.
And I think these people wouldn't know what they were paying for. They would say, what do I owe you? And they would get a $10,000+ bill, and I think they assumed that was everything. And then when they came back in 7 months ago, they would get hit with the impact fees and then also the additional cost of connection once we actually went out and did the connection. In the last 7 months, we've got impact fees up front, and so now people are paying those at the time of permitting, which has left this installation fee that's still the sole straggler, basically. And so by passing the ordinance you just passed a minute ago, you've now taken that out of the equation, and we won't have that issue any longer. So, should take care of it.
Right, everything will be paid
Up front.
Up front.
So very roughly speaking, gentlemen, for the pad developments that Tracy has described here, impact fees for water and sewer and connection fees for water and sewer, your basic hookups to utilities and so forth, what sort of fraction of the total sales price do those things amount to? 5% or worse, or what?
Well, so
This is out of scope for this agenda item.
I know
I'm sorry,
that, but
it's not
I just
so
looking for one number.
It might be interesting for you to sit with Tracy and get numbers like that, because I'm not even sure Chuck can answer that.
I could give you a comparison quickly if you wanted. Worldmark paid like $287,000 for 190 units.
Okay,
If that's-
so is there any other discussion regarding this item?
So, let me see if I understand this. The amounts that are in, for sewer connection fees that are in the language in the ordinance are the same, haven't changed from what they are now. Is that correct?
Is that
Is
correct?
that what it says in your packet? If it does, yes.
The
So-
packet is saying 500, 600, 550, and 650.
Yeah.
Right. So then there would be no need to pass this. We could just wait for the consolidated fee schedule when the proposed fees would be included, right?
Wait a minute, the ordinance struck all of the existing fees.
Yeah.
The ordinance struck all of the existing fees.
So we still gotta have something in there.
And it has the water connection fees, which haven't been covered yet.
But those aren't.
Did it strike the water connection fees in the?
I think it,
The old ordinance had the fees in that language.
in the body of the ordinance.
But now the new ordinance with the strikeout version doesn't have the fees in there, so.
So that the fees can change.
There are no fees if you don't
You don't
pass
approve a
these
resolution.
fees. Because the new ordinance doesn't show any fees. It says fees will be established by the city council.
Okay.
So this resolution was for you to establish the fees per the new ordinance.
So is there a motion?
I'm still confused. I understand we need to pass something to have fees, but at the same time, we did not publish the right fees. So are we voting, would we be having a motion to pass what's in the packet?
So what I'm
Gotcha.
showing up here is your packet,
I think
right?
so.
Chuck is saying what's in the packet is correct.
Yeah, right up there is in your packet, correct? 4-inch sewer.
Yes, that's.
You're just saying your slide was wrong, but
That's
what is in
correct.
the packet is correct.
Oh, thank you.
So he-
Okay, I finally caught
he-
up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hastily made a slide because I hastily asked you to, so.
I got it. I
And
can.
I'm sorry for
I
the
can
last minute
motion
ask.
to adopt Resolution 26-2019, a resolution modifying water and wastewater connection fees until a master fee ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Ronnie. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kalen. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 10-4. It's Resolution 28, 2019, approving an interlocal cooperation agreement with the San Juan Spanish Valley Special Services District and the City of Moab. Joel worked on this agreement. Is there any reason to have discussion before somebody makes a motion?
Real quick, I'll just summarize it. I worked on it with Chuck. We used the agreement that we had with GWISA from before. This is just allowing the San Juan Spanish Valley Special Service District to tie their lines into GWISA's lines, which will then come down to our WRF or wastewater treatment facility, and the sewage will be treated at that time.
And we're
it's-
going to get paid for that.
They have to pay user rates, and they have to pay an impact fees, and they will pay all the impact fees for a certain number of units up front, and then it comes out to essentially
$319,000.
upfront.
Impact plus.
Yeah, we have
ongoing
prior,
use.
we have
And we've got
prior,
the capacity in the sewer to take it.
we easily have the capacity to take it, and we have prior agreements when we built the sewer that we would take it. So this is just formalizing a pre-agreement agreement.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 28, 2019, approving the interlocal cooperation agreement with the San Juan Spanish Valley Special Services District.
Thank you so much, Mike. Is there a second?
Second.
Kalen, any further discussion?
Can you just remind me, so thank you for the comment you sent me to remind me of what our total capacity, for the plant is as it exists and how much we're currently using. And then just as a council member, what's my best way to kind of monitor over time how we're doing, just to check in with you guys? And I'm just wondering, how close do you get before you decide you need that, is it the third batch reactor or whatever, or the?
Yeah, the third batch reactor. So we'll monitor it on a yearly basis. I think a great time for us to give you an update on the WRF is when we come in for raising the rates every July, which is the plan, because remember, we have the.
Oh my God.
Well, it's a $14 million plant, right? And that was a
We knew that.
economic pro forma that we all put together that said that we were going to raise the rates in order to pay for it. And these
Slow and
folks' rates
steady,
will go up too. So I'm just, in answer to your question, when's a good time to get an update on what the capacity of the plant is? I think a great time would be when we come in on those
Yeah,
rates.
or I mean, how many ERUs would you get down to before you started putting a shovel in the ground?
Yeah, there's actually some language in this agreement that says that as we get closer to 85%.
Oh, that's right, okay.
We have some ability to review developments. But we would certainly do it yearly. It's just that's part of our operation, would be to evaluate the system and make sure that we don't get surprised by overuse or underuse.
Nobody wants that kind of a surprise. Any further questions? Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 10-5, Resolution 30-2019, authorizing the mayor to sign a settlement agreement resolving all claims by the former city manager. I'll call for the motion.
I move to approve Resolution 30-2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kalen, for your second. Thank you, Tawny, for your first.
First.
As this was an item already discussed, is there any need for further discussion? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 10-6, award of the collection agency services proposal. David?
I put together a rap for you, but I'm not going to do it tonight. This is
Please.
no, you have to come back.
Is
Even
it
the
like
first
a
line.
3-minute rap or?
It was pretty extensive, but it's okay. Next time.
Did it rhyme?
Of course
or was
it did.
Like okay.
Raps always rhyme. This is just simply a
I'm really sorry it's not the time.
procurement. It's okay.
Is it to the Fresh Prince song?
I gotta leave you wanting more, you know? This is just simply an item for procurement purposes. The treasurer's office, the finance department is now, we're gonna, contract out for collection services for bills and items that are outstanding, and we have a company we want to go with and need your approval to do that.
Is there a motion?
I move to award the collections agency's services proposal to Bonneville Collections and authorize the city manager to enter into a collections contract once it has been approved by our legal department.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Halen and Mike, for the first. Is it budgeted?
Well, they would keep a percentage of what they collect. So it's budgeted in that we budget for some revenue to come in, yeah.
Oh, for
But it's not an
revenue.
expense.
Got it. Any further discussion?
I just wanted to ask how large, I mean, it sounded like last year when we were doing budgets that collections wasn't a big portion. Is that not true, or?
That's true. We'd like for collections to be you mean like how much we have outstanding or how much
Yes,
we think
and how
we
much
get?
we have in outstanding.
I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I could get Rachel to get you that for
Are we
sure.
in the thousands, like the hundred thousands?
Probably hundreds of thousands would be my guess over like the course of many, many years.
All right.
Which is not atypical.
Because, okay, I mean, I just remember the treasurer's department last year, I mean, we signed off on, it was, under 10. I think it was like 5.
That was ones we
different?
actually wrote off and said we're no longer going to even try to collect on, I think.
Yeah.
Is that what that?
I think so.
Yeah, as opposed to what's technically out there for us to go still.
Oh, I see, okay.
Knock on the door.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 10-7, Resolution 2019, adopting the fiscal year 2019-2020 tentative budget and setting a public hearing date for May 14, 2019. Discussion and possible action. So what I understand this to be is just tentative. We still have workshops. We're still going to discuss items. So is there a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 23-2019, which adopts the tentative budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 for the city of Moab, and to hold a public hearing for this budget on May 14, 2019.
Thank you, Karen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tawny. Any discussion needed? Call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 11, approval of bills against the city of Moab. Take it away, Kalen. Give me a motion.
Hold on.
Waiting for your motion. I thought you were just ready to motion. No.
He's in
I move-
second mode.
I move to approve the bills for April 7th through 17th in the total amount of $985,748.14.
Thank you, Kalen. Did you get that, Eve?
It's in the email.
Yes.
It's in the
I'll
email.
second.
Thank you, Tani. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
I will move, we go into closed session, but of course I don't know about what. Hold on, if I could find the right piece of paper, that would be good. To discuss character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual or individuals.
Thank you, Ronnie. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Kaylin? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are moving into a closed session, so
Make it
thank you all.
snappy.
Thank you, David.
Do you need me?
Thank you,
I
Chris.
think it's just council, so.